Yeah, once it kind of pulls up, then you should just post that. Yeah, otherwise it'll duplicate all your stuff. That's good. And you're good?
We're good. Good. So now that one's over, can you launch the slides for us? You think we'd give them a rest, but no.
Can everybody on Zoom see the slideshow?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. Second.
Sorry, can I interrupt? Before we start, can I ask a question?
Sure.
These presentations, will they be available to us through email?
Yes, they certainly will.
Derry, will they be on the website? Yeah. So do you want to just say something about that, just right off the bat?
Sure, yeah. So you've all noticed that we're now streaming the meeting live to our YouTube channel. So a recording of the meeting will be posted to the project webpage, as well as the meeting slides. So it'll be available to all of you and to the general public after the meeting.
So the webpage is a central source for all information, including agendas and minutes and live stream recordings and stuff like that. So that's the go-to kind of place. Good. Any other questions like that right off the bat? Okay, let's get going. Just have a couple of things we've offered our acknowledgement. Just to frame the rest of the afternoon, just today's goals. It really, from my point of view, this is about laying a foundation for the work that's to come. So there's going to be a lot of information out today. So the goals are aligned with that. First of all, to introduce you all to each other. You'll probably spend more time together than you wanted to, but here we are. So it's nice to get to know each other and to know where you're coming from. And to introduce you to the liquid waste management process itself, the Comox Valley Sewer Service Liquid Waste Management Plan and the Sewer Extension South Liquid Waste Management Plan Addendum, which we're going to hear a lot about today. To introduce you to the committee roles, there are two committees, the TAC and the PAC committees, and we're functioning as one at this point. So just to take a look and to understand the roles and the responsibilities of being part of this these committees, a little bit about the decision-making process, and then we'll look ahead to the next meeting. So does that sound like appropriate goals for the day? Anybody have any questions? Okay. Did you want to introduce them?
Yeah, so we've got Ian with WSP, who's going to be presenting the next number of slides. So I'll pass it over to him. You can sit here or...
And Ian, we were hoping that you would just walk through these acronyms and abbreviations for us, just so that, and you know, we all, I'm sure, read the reports, and there is a dizzying array of acronyms. So that's your first task.
WSP is an acronym I'm not familiar with.
Ah, that's a good place to start.
All right. Is this now on? All right. Perfect. First of all, thank you, everybody. Thanks, Alison. Thanks, Davey, Mark, and Vince for arranging everything. It's really a privilege to be here and to deal with this issue. This is quite a pressing issue, especially for the town. Sorry. So So it's an important deal that we have to deal with. There's a list of acronyms that was also handed out. So if you go through them, everywhere the word will start with CV, and that will be for the Comox Valley and the CVRD, Comox Valley Regional District, and it will go on through the whole list. So I don't want to spend too much time on all of that. So please, there's handouts of all of that. If we refer to, we will discuss that in full. But these were the most important ones. So CVSC, Comox Valley Sewage Commission, EASC, Electoral Area Service Committee, CVSS is the Comox Valley Sewer Service. And then this is quite a mouthful, CVWPCC. That is referenced quite a lot. And that is the wastewater treatment work. So that is Comox Valley Water Pollution Control Center, EIS, Environmental Impact Study, Liquid Waste Management Plan. Then the other important thing that we will see, you'll see that on the slides a lot, is the SES, is the Sewer Extension Self project. So that is our focus on this one. And then TAC, PAC, our public advisory committees, technical advisory committees, and then the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy. So that is quite a long one. So keep that next to you, please, as we go through, because it's quite an extensive list. Now my next question is this. Click to the next slide. All right.
Sorry,
Sorry,
sorry, Ian, can you just tell us what WSP stands for?
WSP is our company name. So you'll see that has an old name. Carmen, can you remember? Yeah, they changed it. It was bought over and it was just this acronym that we have as it is now. WSP, probably one of the top 3 largest consulting engineers in the world. Can you hear me properly? Because it's quite an echo on this, especially if you hear your own voice and you hear what my wife needs to hear. So it's quite irritating all the time for her, apparently. So yes, our experience in BC, we have done a lot of work. We have been involved in a lot of different disciplines. These are just some of the 20 liquid waste management plans that we've done in most recent times. Like Derry mentioned, we were involved in the previous liquid waste management plan of the current one that they're busy with for the CVSS liquid waste management plan. So once again, there's your acronyms. There's an acronym next to you. Right, then the liquid waste management process as a whole, it's a long process. It's not a complicated one, but it has involved with a lot of people coming together and get to a solution. So it takes time. And from our side, from WSP side, we have a lot of people involved. I'm just at this point presenting this. So if there's a question, please feel free. If I don't know, if I don't have the answer, there are many more engineers that's involved in this project, which I will refer to then if something should happen. All right. So what is a liquid waste management plan? There's a whole list, a whole guideline that was set out by the ministry to say, how does this whole thing sit together? So we are just basically just extracting some of the main key components that we need to discuss and that we can work through just to make sure everybody's on the same page as we work through this. All right, so it is a liquid waste management project. In essence, it's a three-stage process for managing liquid waste while meeting regulatory requirements. So it examines, first of all, examines this long list of wastewater needs for the whole community. It is not just involved with the wastewater treatment works itself, but includes the conveyance, it includes the pump station, everything that has to do with liquid waste. It is designed to be a participatory process. So it involves all the stakeholders. That's why we're all here. It is involved in the public, the stakeholders, the right holders, and anyone that can influence and guide the decision-making process. It also acts as a written record. So while we are talking, poor Michael is making notes like crazy at the back. So we can send this all. So for Ken's question, this will all be minuted and the presentation will be within. Then also it provides borrowing authorization to implement capital projects, which is where we come at the end. Once everything has approved, the CVRD can go to the fund manager, to whoever they need to go to get the funds and to procure the funds. But they first want to know, do we have a project? Can we go ahead with that? All right, so while I'm going through this, if there's a question, please, there's time for question at the end, but if there's a pressing matter, please feel free to ask the question. We can address that immediately. So a basic liquid waste management process has 3 stages. So in summary, stage 1, so this is now your typical process. Stage 1, identify existing conditions and community goals. It develops a wide range of options, and then these options are considered for regulatory compliance and practicality and to achieve the community goals. And all these options are then pared down, and we eventually come to a short list. So then we park stage 1, and this will move over to stage 2. Stage 2 is more a detailed evaluation of the shortlisted options. It provides additional impact study, environmental impact studies, and it selects the preferred solution for the key components. So these two, a lot of the time, these 2 stages can be combined, and we can submit one report for stage 1 and 2 together. That was done with a CVSS liquid waste management process. So once we've passed stage 1, it has been approved by the TAC, by the steering committee, by all the role players involved. It will then go over to stage 3, where the further development of the selected option for implementation, operation, and financing. That's also the point. If there's an issue with the wastewater treatment work and they need to increase the capacity, that is the time when they will apply for the operational certificates. And then the completed plan is then submitted for approval to the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. The climate change strategy. So that is, in essence, the whole strategy as it goes through. So in summary, big list of items. We all come together, we decide a big list of items. What do we need? What does the community need? Then we work down, get a short list option. Then we workshop on stage 2, these shortlisted items, and we get to more. We provide enough information for you to make a decision. And then we go with a go forward option in stage 3 and develop that to actual projects. All right, so then if you look at liquid waste management plan, who is involved? Who are the key role players? And so they are it's set up in 3 main committees. You have the steering committee, the public advisory committee, and the technical advisory committee. So the TAC, and in a lot of cases, the TAC, the public and technical advisory committee are combined and it's handled on the same time, like we are doing at this point, and it was also done like that for the CVSS liquid waste management plan. So steering committee first, it guides and receives all the information from the advisory committees and make recommendations to the local government. On the CVSS liquid waste management project, the previous one, or the one that's currently underway, the steering committee was the Comox Valley Sewage Commission. And on the the sewer extension south, which is this project, this addendum project, the CVRD Electoral Area Service Committee will be the steering committee. Okay. The public advisory committee, at the end, we will discuss the terms of reference for this public advisory and the technical advisory committee. So I'm not going to expand too much on that because we are dealing with that later on. But in essence, the public advisory committee represents the community and the stakeholders and the right holders, everybody that is involved, that is impacted by this, that needs to have a say. And we need to hear you. We need to understand what is your needs and how can we channel this in the right direction for the project. Then the technical advisory provides input on the regulatory and technical requirements. So once again, that's a lot of the engineers, it's a lot of the municipality staff that's involved with that. But once again, we will go into the terms of reference for that to give more detail on that. All right, so that is in essence, in broad spectrum, there's a whole guideline set up we have a step-by-step guide to evolve this. But before we go into the not the technical, in the specific liquid waste management plan for the CVSS, is there anybody that has questions about the liquid waste management process as a whole, as is at this point? All right.
Are we currently at, like, have stage 1 and 2 been completed and we're into stage 3, or we're just at stage 1?
Perfect. Good question. Thank you for that. So we are, it's coming up. I'll explain to you, but basically, typically this is how it will be, the 3 stages. We have the CVSS, so that's the Comox Valley Sewer Service Liquid Waste Management Plan, and that involved from the town of Courtney all the way, the force mains down to the wastewater and including the outfall. So that was the first liquid waste management process, and they are at stage 1 and 2. The report has been submitted, and now it needs to go approval, then go to the ministry, and once that is approved, they can go to stage 3. So that is for the CVSS liquid waste management process. But we are now starting addendum process with the sewer extension south. So that means, and there's a slide that will illustrate this. So we will do another stage 1 and 2, and we will include that into that stage 1 and 2. But stage 1 and 2 of the CVSS, that is at the point where it needs to get approval, and then it can go out to the ministry. So that's perfect. Thank you.
Can I just say to the people on Zoom, if you have any questions, just raise your hand and we'll see you and acknowledge you. So feel free to chime in.
Thank you, Alison. All right. So now, if we look at this, sorry, Michael, the slide is moving your stuff around. So we have a stage 1. So for the CVSS liquid waste management process, once again, you went through, some of you were involved, you went through this process. So a detailed list of liquid waste management options was discussed. It provided a high-level technical evaluation of the options, including feasibility, risk, and just on a high-level costing. Then the report was written, that went on and provided a detailed evaluation of these options. So more in detail, look at the finer information, because once again, you start off wide and you narrow it into until you get to your preferred solution. So they looked at various options, and that's support the advancement of one option of these major studies to go to the stage 3. So if they look at the 3 major studies, so that include the pump stations, plus the conveyance, plus the wastewater treatment side. All right, so that resulted in the draft CVSS liquid waste management process. So that red line there at the bottom, that is, this thing has no pointer. That red line, that is where we are currently for your question. So a draft CVSS liquid waste management stage 1 and 2 combined report is currently being reviewed by the Comox First Nation and by the CVSS liquid waste management TAC, PAC, and then the steering committee. So that is where we are. So the next step on this will be, so the plan was originally, upon approval of this report, the CVRD will then move forward developing the stage 3 report. But now we're coming in with the addendum process. All right, so I'm going to show you this same slide again, but just to show where the addendum fits in, and then we can look at that. So the need for the sewer extension south addendum liquid waste management process. Yes, that is a mouthful, but that we will present, or there will be a discussion paper number 2 that will discuss this whole process. Why are we at this point where we need the addendum? Why wasn't there liquid waste management on that side? What was the options? What happened to the referendum? So that will cover the whole session of why we are at this point. So I don't want to spend too much time on that, but there was a decision made in the CVR board in August 2020 for the expansion of the CVSS services area to include portion of the electoral area A. And the main driver of this was the protection of the fine sound. Yeah. So that was the main thought of it, and how can we convey? So on the next presentation, when we look at discussion paper 3, there's a drawing to show what is the first phase, what is the CVSS liquid waste management, and where does this one tie in, that you can just see that visually on the map where it is. All right. So yeah, a lot of work on the sewer extension itself has been completed. So that technical work has been, a lot of that has been done. So that's why we're looking to include this in a liquid waste management process. So we don't have to go back, typical liquid waste management process, long process, look at all previous work that has been done, but we have now already combined all of that information. We have combined all of these work already. So that's how we are planning to roll this out. And then the development of the addendum will follow the provincial liquid waste guidelines, including the involvement of the TAC and the public engagement. So this whole process, this whole addendum process was discussed with the ministry. They are aware of that. So that is not new. It is not something new that we're trying. It is a known process to fold it in. And the ministry are aware of the situation. All right. So now where do this addendum process fits in? All right. So like I said, the previous slide we saw, we have the stage 1, then stage 2 and stage 3 as we have for the CVSS liquid waste management plan. Now for the sewer extension self liquid waste management plan, we will go back, do a stage 1 and 2 combined, get the addendum and submit that to the ministry. And when the CVSS liquid waste management process is approved and this addendum is approved, we will carry on with a combined process for stage 3. So that is how it's set up. If we look at this slide, so once again, stage 1 was the same up to the red line. Now we will start with this addendum, expanding the CVSS service area, include a portion of the electoral area A, and development of the addendum to stage 1 and 2 CVS liquid waste management process, following provincial guidelines, including the involvement of the TAC. So once we go through this, we will go to the stage 3, where we can include the sewer extension self liquid waste management addendum for stage 1 and 2 with the previous report. And then this whole process will move on to the stage 3. Right. Then in your typical liquid waste management process, there are certain components that you need to address. The guidelines are very clear on what needs to happen and what needs to do. There have been a discussion with the ministry, and there are some items, because we are only doing a force main and a pump station. We are not doing anything on the wastewater treatment side because that has been handled. We are busy with that on that side. So that's why it's not needed to look at. So the planning components that we will not discuss in this process will be the reclaimed water that has been dealt with. The combined sewer and sanitary overflows has been dealt with in the previous liquid waste management process. The wastewater treatment plant in a whole has been worked through and looked at and gone through in detail in the previous liquid waste management process. Same for stormwater, and then the integrated resource, the recovery. That has all been dealt with the previous process. So that's why there's no need for this, because we do not influence this with the addendum process at all. So that's why these items is the only items from the whole list from the ministry that we will not need to address in this report specifically.
Ian, can I just ask if there are any questions about that? Is that clear to everybody? It took me a little while to get my head around that one. Great.
All right. I have a feeling that when we look at more at discussion paper 3, once we have social engineering's discussion paper number 2, once we had that as well, and then we go into more of the technical side, it will become even why certain work has been done and what has been done. So we will look at why do we not need to look at the wastewater treatment work specifically, And we will have that discussion in that paper, in the discussion paper 3. All right, so on this one, this is just the way forward. This is a slide just to show what is for this meeting, the 3 discussion papers, and then we will have some, the future TAC meetings. I'm not sure if that dates have been confirmed. That was the tentative dates at that point. So there's some dates on it, and then that is the subjects that we will cover in the next few TAC meetings. So we can look at that. I think that is my last slide on the general layout of the liquid waste management process and where we fit into the CVSS and to the sewer extension addendum process. Listen if there's any questions.
Yes, I have a question. So in this addendum to the South Sewer or the CV, whatever it is, we talk about identifying alternatives. Is that been precluded from this aspect of the liquid waste management plan because it's an addendum, or are you still looking at alternatives for South Sewer?
So
I can take that, Ian, if you want. Yeah. So Jim, as you might remember, we've gone through a previous liquid waste management process, which Mikkel will be talking about a little bit today, which did identify a long list of options, and a shortlisted option was selected for servicing the south area. So we're going to be kind of building on that work and the work that's happened since that time in terms of the expansion or agreement to expand the service area by the board, and really focusing in on this concept for regional sewer service to the south. But that said, we will be looking at kind of options for how that service may be provided in terms of phasing, collection system design, and otherwise.
Thanks, Terry.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks, Ian. Much appreciated.
Yeah.
Then I think I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
Perhaps I do have a question that just
Go ahead.
came to me there. You've referred to it as being added to the existing service area. Should we assume that this becomes an extension of a service rather than an individual service of its own with respect to taxes and user fees?
Good question.
Yeah, yes and no, I guess. So the way that the service is kind of envisioned to expand would be including the south in the regional treatment and conveyance work. So that would be including them in the regional service in that way. But then there will be individual service areas for the neighborhood collection systems where the residents and users in those areas will be responsible for paying the operations and maintenance of those individual collection systems, but then also paying into that regional service as well.
So a follow-up, what would be an example of a regional neighborhood? Would that be Union Bay proper? Would that be Craig Derrick subdivision? Would that be Briarwood?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So in one of Ian's slides later on, you'll see kind of all of the individual catchment areas that have been developed for the south, and those catchment areas would essentially form one kind of neighborhood, I guess.
Nothing else? Any other questions? Great, thanks for those questions. And then I'm going to turn it over to Christiane to outline. Sorry?
I told Mikkel she was up.
Oh,
No,
do you want to do it this way? Okay.
Yes.
Over to you, Christiane.
Okay.
And if you could just introduce yourself again for us.
Absolutely. Everybody hear me okay? And I'll just ask Michael to pop up my slides, I think. Hopefully they're there. Oh, sorry, I'm driving. Okay, good. Great. So I'm here today to speak to you about our public engagement component of this liquid waste management plan addendum. I have just about 5 minutes here that I'll chat to you. If you have any questions, I'll just take a pause at the end of each slide and you can ask me. I'll just introduce myself quickly again. My name is Christiane Weil, and I'm the Senior Manager of Strategic Initiatives. And basically what that means is that I do public stakeholder and partner consultation, as well as supporting Indigenous relations for our more complex projects like this one. And I've had the opportunity to work on the Comox Valley Sewer Service Liquid Waste Management Plan and the subsequent Comox Valley Sewer Conveyance project, which is happening now. Oh. So the CVRD follows the International Association of Public Participation's engagement spectrum, and this helps us to identify the level of involvement that we're seeking from residents in any of our projects. So this helps us to manage expectations, both for the public and the CVRD, which can ensure genuine engagement by just making sure that the public understands what information, what feedback we're seeking from them, and what that information will be used for. For this particular project, we're looking at 3 pieces along the spectrum. The first being inform, which is essentially just information out, information that we provide. And in this particular case, that's keeping the community informed about next steps for the project. And including explaining about the LWMP process and information like how to follow these PAC meetings. For our consultation component, we're looking to obtain feedback from the community about the preferred option that will be chosen by the committees here today. And collaboration is what we're doing here, which is working with all of you to develop the solutions and consensus-based recommendations to the Electoral Areas Services Committee. So this is a slide just to outline our engagement process. Our public consultation strategy was endorsed by the Electoral Areas Services Committee in June, and it involves gathering input at 3 levels, touching on the different aspects of the engagement spectrum. So this includes both informing and consulting the community at various stages and using various tools to do so. It also includes consultation with First Nations through an established process, and I'll speak to that on the next slide. It involves collaboration with our project partners, including Comox First Nation, as well as the technical and public advisory committees. And then all that work feeds back to the Electoral Area Services Committee for decision. So the Comox First Nation is our project partner. Comox has 3 reserves in the Comox Valley and fee simple and treaty lands within the project boundaries of the Sewer Extension South project. The province's consultative area database identifies 12 additional impacted nations, 6 of which have overlapping land and marine territory, including Royston Bay, Union Bay, and Baines Sound, and 6 of which have overlapping marine territory, including Baines Sound. A First Nations consultation framework has been established and shared with the province for review. Our consultation with Comox First Nation will continue throughout this project. It will be separate and parallel to public consultation through an already established process for engagement with the nation. And the CVRD has reached out at this point to the 12 additional nations with overlapping territory to determine both their interest in the project and how they would like to be engaged. Okay, and my final slide here is just to touch on the engagement timelines. So this is a snapshot from our public engagement strategy that was endorsed by the ESC. Our consultation will occur in 4 phases, starting with project initiation, which includes the establishment of the Public Advisory Committee. In our current stage, which is including working with you to identify the preferred options, and we plan to share those back with the community for feedback in early 2023. The next step is developing the draft addendum through further collaboration with PAC, and again, consulting with the community at that point in time. And then finally, review and approval of the draft report before submitting it to the province for review. And throughout this process, we will continue to engage with Comox First Nation and the other impacted nations as per their desire to be involved or informed about the work underway. And that is all for me. Happy to take your questions.
Thanks, Christian. Any questions about the consultation process or your part in it? Okay. Thank you very much, Christian.
Can everyone hear me okay? Yes. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Michal Simchon. I'm with Associated Engineering. I was a project engineer on the liquid waste management plan that we did back in 2014. And today I'm going to be giving you a presentation summarizing that work that took place then. Now I'll ask you to, this is work that I've not done just recently. It's from 7-8 years ago. So I might not be able to respond to questions right away. But if there are any items that the committee feels are important, I would ask you to direct them to the CVRD and we can certainly take things back as required. Okay, so the objectives of the 2022 summary report, hopefully each of you has had a chance to look at that report. The intent was to provide a summary of the work that was undertaken 2014 and 2015 as part of the South Region combined Stage 1 and Stage 2 liquid waste management plan. And really that report is intended to provide history and context to this committee, the TAC PAC, as you work through next process for the South Region. So back in 2014, Associated Engineering was engaged to undertake a combined Stage 1 and 2 liquid waste management plan as for the South Region at the CVRD. At the time, there was a partnership between the CVRD, the Village of Cumberland, as well as the Comox First Nations. And the intent with the liquid waste management plan was to provide the community with flexibility and a community-specific solution for collection, treatment, and discharge of wastewater. And also you would have heard this many times already, but one of the unique and important components of a liquid waste management plan is having that public consultation, public buy-in into the preferred option. So this is a bit of a timeline of all of the work that has been done to date. It goes as far back as into the 70s, so obviously way before I was involved. And really just to show that there's been a lot of work that has been done in this area. But the purpose of this presentation is to focus on that work that started in 2014. So in the context of a liquid waste management plan, we have to look at the applicable regulations for wastewater treatment. There's two aspects to that. There's a provincial aspect and the federal one. So from the provincial point of view, we have the municipal wastewater regulation, which came out in 2012. In addition to that, and a bit unique to Vancouver Island, there's also the Vancouver Island phosphorus in-stream objective. And so this is specific and higher treatment levels that are applicable to any discharge of treated effluent into streams or rivers on Vancouver Island. And then in addition to that, there's the federal regulations for wastewater treatment. That is under the Wastewater Systems Effluent Regulation, the most recent one coming out in 2015. Now, these two regulations, they're similar, but they are not the same. And there are sort of nuances to the differences between the two regulations. The point is whatever preferred option we establish here or is established does need to meet both the federal and the provincial regulations. So in looking at wastewater treatment for the South Region, one of the places we start is how much wastewater are we going to be producing, over what's the design horizon for this wastewater treatment system, and what kind of wastewater strength do we anticipate. So at the time in 2014, we looked at Royston, Union Bay, and the village of Cumberland. And we looked at the current population at the time and projected it to the year 2060 based on certain population growth. We also provided some considerations for inflow and infiltration. So inflow relates to stormwater or rainwater that leaks into the system and then ultimately results at the treatment plant and has to get treated. Infiltration speaks to groundwater that can infiltrate into the piping system. And again, it's just more flow that needs to get treated. So in addition to the actual quantity of water that we're producing here, there's also what's called load projection. So this is essentially a function of how strong is the wastewater and how do we need to treat it. And so we had developed sort of typical generation rate based on the type of communities that we were looking at here and the population that we had, how much wastewater could we anticipate to be produced in the area. So in addition to that, one of the other aspects associated with the liquid waste management plan is undertaking an environmental impact study. Now, this is typically a two-stage process, a bit confusing because it's separate from the stage 1, stage 2 process for the liquid waste management plan. But the idea is that the intent was to look at what are these different discharge options and how is the environment considered in these different scenarios. Now, the stage 1, stage 2 work was not actually carried or was not completed. And I'll get into that a little bit. But what is important to highlight is there were a number of other environmental investigations that were undertaken to support some of our options development and some of our scenario evaluations. So like I said earlier, and you would have heard as well from Ian, big component of liquid waste management plans are the advisory committees and the public outreach component. So like I said, we did have the Comox First Nations were a partner at the time. In terms of public outreach, we had 3 open houses that were carried out between 2014 and 2015. They included poster boards, newsletters, surveys, that kind of thing. Really an opportunity to get feedback and help inform the committee. And then we did also have, similar to this committee here, some of you even sat on that, we did have a combined TAC PAC committee and five meetings were carried out then. So this figure is, I actually created it a very long time ago, but a bit messy here, but I'll just walk you through how we developed it here. So essentially what we did with the committee was we tried to hear and collect what's important to the committee, what are concerns, what do we really want to incorporate here as we're looking at wastewater treatment options. So we came up with this idea of give us all your raw elements of what's important, and let's come up with one very long list of discharge options. That's sort of at the top right, which is that green circle. Then we went through a high-level screening process where we essentially identified any possible showstoppers that allowed us to shortlist the number of options. Once we had a short list of the number of discharge options, we then sort of developed them into a more comprehensive set of scenarios. So these scenarios added components like the collection system, what kind of treatment are we going to be providing, what kind of, is there resource recovery opportunities as part of these scenarios. And then that was carried forward to a comparative evaluation of these scenarios. So don't worry about reading what's on that figure here, but the point is that we started with a very long list of options. We had a total of 9 discharge options that we looked at, and they were first reviewed with the TAC PAC in the 3rd meeting. And as you can see, there were sort of a few with obvious showstoppers. That's the red boxes there. So we identified some obvious no-goes. allowed us to essentially eliminate those discharge options. Some other ones had some areas of concern, which are shown in yellow, but not necessarily showstoppers. And then there were a few where there were a lot of advantages, and those are the ones shown with green. So we started with 9, and we ended up going down to 4 options. And I'll just do a high level walkthrough here of the various ones. So option 1 was treatment in the South region with discharge to Bain Sound. That was then carried forward into a scenario. Option 2 was discharge to Georgia Strait. That was also developed into a scenario. Option 3 was discharge to Cape Lazo. Now this one involved treatment in the South region, conveying it to the location of the Comox Valley Water Pollution Control Center, but then actually having a separate outfall system right beside the current one. And this one was eliminated because of that twinning of the outfall system, which was deemed to be kind of redundant and not very good use of capital funds. So then we modified that one slightly and came up with this option 3B. And this one was treatment in the South region, conveying it to the Comox Valley Water Pollution Control Center, and then upsizing the existing outfall system and combining this treated effluent with that treated effluent from the existing wastewater treatment plant down the same route. Option 4 was essentially conveying raw wastewater across the estuary and having that treated at the existing wastewater treatment plant. At the time, that was eliminated because of the environmental concerns for having raw wastewater across the estuary. Option 5, so this was discharge to Trent River and Washer or Hart Creek. This one was eliminated because of that Vancouver Island phosphorus objective, which increases treatment requirements for discharge to streams and rivers. Option 6 was discharge to ground in a single location. So instead of going out into the water, it was into some ground area. The challenge here is we could not find an area that was large enough to accommodate this. And so then that's led to option 7, which was, okay, if we can't find a single area, are there multiple locations to discharge treated effluent? This one was eliminated because of we did do some environmental investigations looking at the soils. They were very compact and not really amenable to this kind of system. Option 8 was a slight modification of this. This was discharged to subsurface ground, so actually injecting treated effluent deep into the ground. And this one did have some interest from the committee, so that one was carried forward into a scenario. And then the final one, option 9, was management and improvement of existing on-site systems. This one was eliminated because of the feasibility of essentially bringing all of the existing systems up to compliance. Any questions on that? Okay, I'll keep going. So like I said, we started with 9. We ended up with 4 options here. I'll just show you on a graphic where they're located. So Bain Sound, that was scenario A, developed into scenario A. Then we had scenario B, which was the discharge to Georgia Strait. That one goes east of the Comox Bar and just over Sandy Island Park. And then scenario C was Cape Lazo. So essentially same treatment location of where the existing outfall is from the existing wastewater treatment plant. And then scenario D was not into any water body. It was actually still on land. So we developed these scenarios and then we undertook what's called a triple bottom line analysis. This is a defendable approach to comparing different options. And the reason we're looking at sort of triple bottom line is we're considering environmental aspects, economic aspects, and social license really around these options. So for instance, from an environmental point of view, we looked at considerations like greenhouse gas emissions or disturbance to sensitive ecosystems? And how does that differ between the different scenarios? From an economic point of view, we looked at what's the initial capital cost that would be associated with a given scenario. And then we also looked at what's the life cycle cost over a certain operating time period. From a social point of view, one of the things that we heard that was important to the committee was truck traffic. So trucks that would be associated with transporting sludge from the new treatment plant to the Skyrocket facility, and what kind of truck traffic would we have to be dealing with here? And then in addition to these three components, we then look at risk, and risk sort of helps us look at aspects that the committee felt were items that didn't really fit into any of these categories, but nevertheless should support and could impact the decision of what a preferred solution is. So as part of the triple bottom line analysis, we develop a multi-criteria approach where we have a quantifiable attribute. And that was work that we did associated in the office. We find a way to come up with an attribute that we can actually quantify and put a number to and compare it from each scenario. And then what was important is once we quantified it, then we came to the committee and we said, okay, committee, we need your help in establishing how important is this parameter for you. So this was done by consensus with the committee, with the PAC TAC. And so to come up with a score for each scenario, it's a product of the quantity or the quantifiable attribute against the weighting or of importance. We also looked at risk. So for those of you who may not be familiar, risk is also a product of the likelihood of something happening. And then if it does happen, what's the severity of that occurrence? So how catastrophic is it if that risk were to happen? And then we sum it all up and we come up with a score for each scenario. So first things first is we looked at just the triple bottom line approach. We sort of put the risk aspect aside for now. And we looked at environmental, economic, and the social considerations. So this figure can be a bit counterintuitive, so I'll try and walk you through here. But essentially, we have the 4 scenarios on the bottom. Scenario A is the one that has the tallest bar. So what that means is it scored the highest. And so from a scoring point of view, it was, you could think of it as the best option. Then scenario D, which was the ground discharge at depth, was the next one in line. Scenario C, which was discharge to Cape Lazo, was the third. And then the final one was scenario B, Strait of Georgia. Now, if we just look at some of the individual bar colors, so the red ones represent environmental, and the larger the bar, that means the better the score. So what this is saying is scenario A and scenario D had a pretty comparable environmental score, and they were high. Compared to that, scenario C had a lower environmental score, and scenario B had the lowest. Now, specific for scenario B, which was the discharge to Strait of Georgia, this one was the lowest because the treatment level, we just achieved sort of secondary treatment. We weren't going to go above and beyond treatment there. Then if we look at the green bars, so the largest green bar is for Bain Sound, scenario A, and that's what that's saying is it was the sort of the most economical option. Scenario D was sort of followed after. Scenario C, which was discharged to Cape Lazo, had the smallest green line, so it was the most costly. The reason for that is because there was the cost for the treatment plant itself, but also the cost for upsizing the existing outfall system and combining into that system. And then we have the blue bar on top of that, and that is the social category. So what this is saying is the blue, or the sort of the social score for scenarios A, D, and C were essentially the same and were at the top from a blue point of view. But then scenario B had no blue scores. So what that means is it was worse from the social point of view. And that's because this specific scenario had more truck traffic, so it scored lower. So we looked at this score with the committee, and with the committee, we decided, okay, there's actually too much risk associated with scenario D, which is the ground discharge at depth. So that one came out. We also wanted to look at risk, and so that was going to be the next step. And we also felt that of the category, or out of the categories, environmental, economic, social, the committee felt like social wasn't that important. Really, they wanted to focus on economic, environmental, and risk. So we actually took out the social from the analysis. And so then, and we added risk. So this changed the landscape of the three options that remained. And it actually moved scenario C, which was the Cape Plaza one, to the top. Now you'll see this one had a really large red bar. So what that means is, from a risk point of view, it had the highest or the best score. The reason here was because one of the risks that we identified was regulatory acceptance. And because there was already a treated out or an outfall in that location that we would essentially be replacing and upsizing, we felt like the acceptance of that discharge location would be a lot easier than, for instance, scenario A, Bain Sound. That one, shellfish was a very big concern there. The involvement of the shellfish industry, the potential for future regulations around viruses, pharmaceuticals, microplastics. It was a bit of an unknown that really impacted the risk score associated with the Bain Sound option. And then also similarly with scenario B. So what we found essentially through this triple bottom line plus risk analysis was that scenario C, discharge to Cape Lazo, had the highest score. And the committee then did, by consensus, decide to put that one forward as the preferred option. So the liquid waste management plan process was paused in 2015, and a referendum was held on that preferred option, that scenario C. Now in June 18, 2016, the referendum actually failed to achieve support of the electorate. And so since then, collaboration with the Comox Valley Sewage Commission has resulted in this revised proposal, which is what WSP is working on here with. And I think that concludes my presentation.
Super, thanks so much. Questions?
I have one question where you talked about truck traffic as being one of the downfalls of the scenario. How many trucks a day were you thinking would be leaving a South Regional facility to haul solids?
So that was what we found, was even though one of them was, I don't recall the exact numbers, but one of them was say 5 and the other was 6, the scoring skewed it, that it said, well, 6 is less than 5. So one of them is going to have the highest score and the other is going to have the lowest score. And so the committee felt like it wasn't really worth looking at the specifics of the generated truck traffic. But wastewater treatment produces solids, and solids need to be taken. At the time, with the treatment that we were looking at, solids were envisioned to be taken off-site and transported to the Skyrocket facility.
Yeah, if I may add, I know the current facility, the Cape Lazo, is roughly 2 trucks a day servicing a considerably greater population. So I'm just wondering where that 5 truck number came from.
That was a totally made up number. I do not recall the actual estimate that we had developed at the time. Derry, I don't know if you do. Okay.
I see Lindsay on Zoom has a question. Just turn your mic on, Lindsay.
Yes, thank you. I'm just curious what other elements of social impact were considered other than truck traffic, if there were?
So at the time with the committee, that was the only one that was considered at the time.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions? Okay, great. Thanks so much.
So a lot of information so far. I've just got a few slides here just to kind of follow on Mikkel's presentation and take us through to kind of where we've ended up today. And then we're going to have a break. So what's changed since the 2016 referendum? So after the referendum, significant research and effort to explore wastewater management options for Area A did continue. While there wasn't support for the preferred option proposed at the time by the community, there was still a demonstrated need for improved wastewater management for the area. In 2018, following a request by the Electoral Area Services Committee, so EASC, the Sewage Commission, which is the governing body for the sewage service, agreed to move forward with an assessment of extending sewer services south. And included in this analysis were technical, regulatory, and financial impacts. So upon review of this assessment, which showed no significant impact given the current capacity upgrades already planned for the service, the Sewage Commission agreed to receive wastewater from Area A. And this really opened the door for community consideration of the extension of regional services south. So with approval of the Sewage Commission in place, a very timely grant opportunity presented itself through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, and the CBRD partnered with Comox in applying for funding under this program. An application was first submitted in 2020, which was unfortunately not successful. However, a revised application was then submitted in 2022, and a decision on that is anticipated in spring 23. So there are several reasons to consider sewer servicing for the South region, as indicated in the graphic shown here. Protecting Bain Sound is particularly important because it's the largest shell fishery in BC and produces 70% of BC's cultured oysters. More recently, some norovirus outbreaks in the region have also highlighted the importance of protecting water quality in this area. Also, we've got aging septic systems, which is also an important consideration. We've done some recent analysis of island health records, which have shown that over, I guess, around 70% of systems in this area are in excess of 25 years old. And there's also a significant number of properties that have systems that predate the introduction of provincial septic regulations, so over 50 years old. There's also dwelling density as a consideration. So there's several existing neighborhoods that have dwelling densities that are very similar to those fully serviced lots in the city of Courtenay or other municipal areas, and what would be well in excess of what would be permitted under current sewage regulations. There also exists environmental constraints which can impact the performance of these systems. This includes poor soils, along with a very high water table in the area. As well, there's anticipated growth. The area around Union Bay is a designated settlement node in the Comox Valley Regional Growth Strategy, and as such, there's the potential for the area to support future growth if sewer services are provided. And the extension of regional sewer service is also very central to reconciliation with the Comox First Nation. So This is just a quote from Chief Nicole Rempel of the Comox First Nation, which really speaks to the importance of working together in reconciliation. The extension of sewer services south supports meaningful reconciliation with Comox by really moving forward together on a project that supports Comox in recognizing and realizing its social, environmental, and economic goals. In February of 2021, the CVRD and Comox ratified a community benefit agreement, which commits both parties to working together collaboratively on a regional sewer service for the area. This agreement provides for much needed upgrades for the Courtney-Comox sewer infrastructure, while also supporting growth and economic development plans for the Comox community. Comox has and are anticipated to acquire through treaty significant land holdings in the south, and the servicing of these lands is very important for Comox in building capacity towards independent government. The extension of sewer services south also supports the protection of the natural environment of Bain Sound and will ensure safe access for Comox to shellfish for food, social, and ceremonial purposes. So a very important project. So a little bit of background on kind of a collaborative approach to regional sewer services for the Comox Valley. The Comox Valley Sewerage Service, which we've heard a little about today, treats raw sewage and wastewater from homes and businesses in Courtney, Comox, and Comox First Nation, which is currently servicing approximately 40,000 people. Wastewater is then conveyed to the Comox Valley Water Pollution Control Center, where it is treated to ensure water meets safe standards before being discharged to the environment through an outfall at Cape Lazo. Approval by the CVRD board to expand the sewer service boundaries to include portions of Area A has really opened the door for community consideration to extend sewer services south into Royston and Union Bay. And there are a number of benefits that may be realized by this extension. Regional service can provide financial benefits through improved efficiencies and economies of scale, with this larger service. And essentially the South would no longer need to build its own standalone treatment plant, and we'd be looking kind of only at conveyance and collection works for that area, which reduces the capital works required for servicing. The operating and maintenance costs for the system would also be shared between a larger kind of area and number of service participants, which also provides benefits. As well, regional service provides access to a permitted wastewater treatment plant without a new outfall or impact to Bain Sound, which we've heard was very important through the last process. This really simplifies permitting and authorizations for the project without the need for a new authorization for discharge, and also provides access to high quality wastewater treatment. So just a little bit about kind of the comparison of community sewer versus septic. So for community sewer, as we've kind of understand and have heard, all wastewater is collected from local homes and businesses, and in this case would be conveyed into the existing regional system for secondary treatment prior to marine discharge. Future plans for the Comox Valley sewage system also include UV disinfection, which we'll be discussing later in the meeting. And there's also qualified professional operators that can be reached 24/7 and are very good at their jobs in operating and maintaining the system. For septic systems, we see varying levels of treatment with effluent returned to the ground at each property. Regular maintenance of septic systems is very important and is required through regulation. At minimum, property owners should be pumping out their septic tanks every 3 to 5 years. And for the more advanced type 2 and 3 treatment systems, annual maintenance is required. However, there's really no oversight body that's looking to ensure this maintenance is taking place. And if septic systems aren't maintained properly, they can really pose a risk to public health and the environment. The communities of Royston and Union Bay are also long established neighborhoods. Recent analysis of the health authority records that I spoke about earlier showed that, like I said, many of these properties have systems that predate the early 1970 introduction of provincial septic regulations. Replacement of septic systems is also very expensive, and particularly for this area on small lots with kind of a limited area for drain field construction. So in those circumstances where there's really a lot of site constraints, typically a type 3 system is required. And for a type 3 system on a small property with limited area can cost in excess of $50,000. Additional regulatory tools to provide for enhanced maintenance and oversight of septic systems has been looked at recently by the CBRD, and it may be something required in the future to address challenges in the area should the implementation of community sewer not proceed. But that said, as shown in Mikkel's previous slides, that was an option that was considered previously on the long list of options and was rejected by the TAC PAC at that time in favor of community sewer. So just a very quick kind of overview of the Sewer Extension South project. So really the intention of this liquid waste management plan addendum process is to include consideration of the Sewer Extension South project within the context of that overall Comox Valley sewer service liquid waste management plan. And as we've heard, this addendum process will be informed by this committee as well as First Nations and the public. And I know we're going to be getting into the details of the project concepts and the options available at the next meeting. But just generally, the Sewer Extension South project includes a 13-kilometer sewer force main. So that's the line shown in gray on the map, connecting Union Bay to Courtney, as well as local collection systems and pump stations to discharge wastewater into that force main. And the project is anticipated to be constructed in phases to ensure that costs remain reasonable, and there will be expansion potential for future development. And that's all I have. Questions?
Derry, could you just go back to that last line?
Yeah.
And I just have a question. Where does the current force main go to?
So the current force main is shown in the darker line.
Okay.
And
To
essentially,
West Courtney.
yeah, that's
just
right.
there. Okay, thank you.
It essentially currently follows the foreshore, but as we know, there's a new project underway to reroute part of that force main.
Great. Thank you for that. Questions? Roseanne?
The 2020 grant that was applied for, what were the reasons that it was unsuccessful?
I'm just trying to remember what we were told. Essentially, with many of these grant programs, there is a lot of competition for a very small pot of money. So I think essentially there were just other projects that scored higher than this one.
Okay, so nothing major that needed to change necessarily.
Other questions?
Yeah, is there a sense in the 2022 grant application as to its chances of success, or are you basically in a wait and see, much like 2020?
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely a wait and see, although we have been advocating pretty hard through the province and other agencies to hopefully improve our chances for success under that one.
Jim?
I'm sure we're going to get into this in later meetings, but I think as a representative of the Union Bay residents, cost is the big thing. Everyone agrees that we need to protect Bay and Sound. There's no disagreement in the community about that. I think the only reason the referendum failed was because of costs, not because of any other reason. So I really hope that you're going to be able to find a way to keep the costs down for the existing residents, particularly when we look at the population projections from the existing residents versus the new development areas. You're talking about a planning horizon to 2060. So the new development is going to add about tenfold in terms of the existing population. So in terms of equity, I would hope that there's some way that the existing residents aren't going to be paying for this new system designed to 2060 that will actually encompass the new development areas while they already have their own systems, although be it, failing systems, many of them.
Yeah.
So I just want to keep people to keep that in mind. The other aspect of that, of course, is the master development agreement with Union Bay Estates that provides for Union Bay Estates to provide an expandable system for the residents of that area. So there has to be, in my mind, some kind of cost offset if that is not going to happen, in order that it be equitable, because we've received very little in the way of any amenity from that development. But I know that's a whole different topic, and I don't want to get into it, but it is still there in their master development agreement for them to provide an expandable system. And if that looks like they build the force main all the way out to the treatment plant and the residents build the collection system, I think that would go a long ways to alleviating some of the concerns of the residents in the community. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I just definitely wanted to echo that that is a concern and a comment that we've heard all the way along the way from residents in that area, and certainly a key consideration for us. And we will be presenting costs at the next meeting for some of the proposed options. So be a chance to discuss more then.
Perhaps a further comment on cost as well. In that the evaluation of costs in the last time around were about the options for installing a sewer. And I think that people that would have voted in that referendum would have been comparing that against do nothing. And, the do nothing option is I have a septic system in the ground and I'll just continue to use that. And in our consultation work and showing the public the costs, I think it's important to say, what will the costs be if we don't have a sewer? And the idea that increased regulation of existing systems and enforcement of replacement and those sorts of things will indeed be a cost to residents. And I think it's important that we be able to see that as a part of the work we do here, is to say, if there isn't a sewer, what is the cost of not having one?
Yeah, thanks, Ian.
Other questions? Anybody on Zoom that has any questions or comments? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ryan.
If we don't get the federal grant, does that is this a non-starter or like?
Certainly, it is a very expensive project. You're looking at a lot of pipe and a lot of money to install local collection systems in those areas. So I'd say senior government funding is really going to be key to implementing this project.
Derry, can you give us a sense of what the grant request is in terms of dollars and what percentage of the overall costs you would hope to be covered by the grant?
Sure. So the grant request was for $27 million. We are still getting updated costs for the project, so I can't give you the percentage of kind of overall project cost that represents, but there will also be contributions from project partners to cover the cost of the project as well that are anticipated.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, Mark?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to support Derry by making one comment, and it was regarding the question about, if this grant doesn't happen, does everything fall apart? And, that's not the case at all. This liquid waste management planning process is very important. It's important that we do it and that we complete it regardless of this particular grant, because grant programs, they come and go. But developing a strategy for this area and coming to a conclusion on that strategy will be incredible support for any future grant opportunities that come along. So an approved liquid waste management plan with the support of the community is golden when it comes to applying for grants and being successful in the future. So important to complete the process.
Thanks, Mark. Any other questions? Yeah, Ryan?
Why step away from a referendum in the communities at this point? Or is that something we're going to touch on later?
Yeah, I think we saw many benefits to this process over a referendum, mainly its ability to kind of take input from the community and really build that into the preferred option, as opposed to kind of developing the option independently and then taking that to kind of a yes, no vote out in the community.
Other questions? Go ahead, Ryan.
Has there been any investigative work in reusing the water that gets pumped through the system? You know, can we not reuse that for fire hydrants or irrigation, or because maybe that'll save on volume going back out into Baden Sound or wherever it's going to go?
Yeah, so I think after the break, Ian's going to get into a little bit more detail on the investigations that were done through the Comox Valley Sewage Service Stage 1 and 2 planning process. And really, that process did look at wastewater treatment and integrated resource recovery options. So yeah, we can tell you a little bit more about that then.
Yeah, go ahead.
Was there any more reconnaissance in developing separate community treatment plants or systems? I know in Union Bay we have a treatment system now, but was there any research in looking at Royston and Union Bay combining and having one there instead of running 13 clicks of pipe all the way around?
Yeah, so I don't know if you can, well, I won't flip back, but that slide that Mikkel showed with kind of the history of all of the planning that's gone on in the area, there certainly have been, we have looked at a number of options, including an independent treatment plant for the south, which was the option that was taken to referendum in 2016. And really we see, well, you know, that project failed at referendum, but also we see significant benefit through this regional approach where we're not having to spend the money to construct a standalone treatment plant in the south.
Terry, there's a question from Malcolm on Zoom. What proportion of waterfront households on septic in Bain Sound does this encompass?
So you can see on the map, the existing residential areas that are proposed to be serviced are all shown in orange. In terms of the number of households that are specifically along the waterfront, I don't know that, but certainly we can find that out.
Is it fair to say, just looking at the map, that with the exception of the white areas, those are all waterfront properties? So it would be all the waterfront properties shown in orange would be included in the system.
That's right.
Yeah. Thanks. Malcolm, does that answer your question?
For now, thank you.
Just to add more to that, actually, sorry, Allison, we are going to be talking about project phasing a little bit later in the process as well. So I think there's not all of those properties are going to be able to be serviced kind of initially, and it is going to happen over time as this funding becomes available. So that is going to be another discussion as to how many of those properties will be able to be serviced in this first phase.
Is there any further or consideration of further extending this down to, say, Fanny Bay, for example, that to catch all of Vane Sound, or is this going to be limited to South End as Union Bay?
I think that's not really an option that we've considered in the past, unless Mark can remember something. Yeah.
I would say no, only because, and I think Ian might touch on this a bit more. So technically, we're already at a fairly extreme limit of how far the wastewater can be pumped, because the longer it spends within a piping system, the more issues there are with the wastewater in terms of the generation of odors and other chemicals. So I think we're at the practical limit in Union Bay. So I wouldn't expect, it could go south by a block or two potentially, but Fanny Bay is still a long ways from Union Bay.
Thank you.
Derry, can I just ask on the map, the white areas, are they parkland or First Nations land or?
The
Just-
white areas.
I was looking specifically along the water there, just going back to Malcolm's question.
Yeah, parkland potentially, like you can see Union Point there, which is provincial land. Can't really see the other ones, but yeah, essentially they're areas where there's no residential development.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, just can't quite see your name. Thank you, Tabitha.
I have a couple questions. In one of the earlier public meetings, talked about that Union Bay States hadn't confirmed their partnership, and then just based on the presentations, it wasn't clear if they had or hadn't. Can you comment on that?
Yeah. So we do have a master development agreement with Union Bay Estates that commits them to providing certain kind of sewer amenities to the community. And so we are kind of working with them right now to determine how this project may kind of fit into that process and that agreement.
On that topic, I've noticed that they have some lots up for sale. Are those going to have newly installed septic systems in that case?
I don't know how that is. Alana's more up to date on kind of current planning applications in the area.
Thanks, Derry. So you have seen a lot of work happening on the Union Bay Estates property, and I would suggest that that's all anticipatory. So the terms of the master development agreement absolutely contemplate that these are serviced properties, and that's our expectation.
Ken?
I'm not sure if it's a right time during the procedure to ask this question, but I know in communities in the interior, and notably Alberta, where you don't have the option of dilution being the solution to pollution by being able to dump into a large water body. For example, in Edmonton, the requirements for dumping the water back into the North Saskatchewan River require tertiary treatments. I noticed the tertiary treatments were not considered in the presentation you gave. If you include tertiary treatment, for example, to remove the phosphate, do you improve the options of what you can do with the water?
Certainly, I would say yes, but I might also just leave this question for Ian when he's up next, because he's going to be talking about the treatment options and levels of treatment that were discussed during the stage 1-2 process for the CDSS.
Sorry, Derek, could you just go over what the colors mean?
Oh yeah, for sure. So everything in green is kind of land within municipal boundaries. The orange areas are existing residential development that is or could potentially be serviced by an extension of sewer services to Royston Union Bay. Then the light purple areas are lands that Comox First Nations may be getting through the treaty process. The dark purple is Comox fee simple lands. And then the kind of striped gray area is the lands, the Union Bay Estates development lands. And the kind of remainder gray shaded area, which actually also kind of includes the Union Bay Estates area and some of the orange areas in Union Bay, is the Union Bay settlement node, which is a designated growth area in our regional growth strategy.
So all of these areas would be hooked up to this, to the new system though?
Yeah, there's potential for all of these areas to be serviced over time, although you know, we're not really sure how growth is going to progress in the region at this time and the pace of growth and such.
Okay, thank you.
Ken, go ahead.
Yes. For newly developed areas, for example, in Royston, with good septic systems, in 25, perhaps in 25 years' time, they are going to have the same issues. How does this plan deal with that possibility that you might need to include areas that are currently excluded? And I guess there's the financial consideration about those. Do we pay for subsequent connection to those areas, say in 20 years' time?
Yeah, so you're talking about areas that may be outside of those orange highlighted areas at this time? Yeah, so certainly there's potential once or if sewer service is available in the area for service to be provided, but really that's going to be I guess determined through kind of zoning, lot densities and otherwise, because it's very inefficient to service kind of areas with large lots and really rural areas, and also not supported through our growth policies of the region.
Any other questions? Then I'd like to propose we take a 15-minute break. There's coffee for you. Beautiful fresh air and sunshine outside, and we'll reconvene at 2:30. Thanks so much.
I'll picture that.
So if I could just ask you to take your seats again, and we'll hear from Ian. Oh, we've lost Ian. Ian, where are you?
He's coming.
Ian, you're going to give us discussion paper number 3. Should I just unmute? There we go. Perfect.
All right, thanks everybody. So the discussion paper 3 deals with the flows and loads for the sewer extension south addendum and the background and provisions in the Comox Valley Sewer Service. If you look at your handout sheet, it takes about 3 lines to put up that whole title into one title block. So we are just summarizing what we have and what happened up to this point, and how we're taking this forward, and how does the South Sewer extension ties into the setup. All right, so it's also a graph not as nice as Darius one previously, but it just shows what is the 2 options, or what are not the 2 options, what are the 2 portions. So the black line that you can see with the blue line, that was for the CVSS portion, and this whole, I want to call it yellow or gold color, that is the whole portion of the South Extension sewer. So it starts down at the bottom from Union Bay with a combination of pump stations, and we're not going to get into that discussion now, but it's a complex system. It is set up for the next discussion paper, but to pump from one station to the next, because you can't, Jim, one of your questions was, how do we defer the cost? We don't want to do everything now up for the next 80 years, because it doesn't make sense to have 1.5 diameter pipeline putting all the way down and then everybody just, so that's why there's some factors that was considered, and we will discuss that in the next paper. But to have a smaller pipe at the beginning and only 2 pump stations, then we can increase it in the future by adding another pump station. So all of that has been considered, and there's a whole workshop for the next discussion paper where we will discuss this and address just on a technical level how that needs to be dealt with. But it's a whole setup of a daisy chain from one pump station to the next, and using that to get to the Courtney siphon, and then eventually tie into the whole northern side of the works into the CVSS portion. So basically what we're trying to show here is that it makes sense to have this as one complete project. This now deals with this whole area, all the way from Union Bay, the one all the way up to the discharge point of Cape Laszlo. So Derry mentioned, I'm not going to go through that, but there's an issue with on-site septic tanks with a history of failure, and it needs to be addressed. You can't just keep deferring the problem, and it needs to be addressed. We can't just look at that and see, not my problem. It's just we keep deferring this. We need to have a solution, and a combined solution that suits everybody. So that's the whole portion, to get all of this away and address that. So we can go on, but one of the questions, Ryan, I think you had, was about the split flows. Can't we use a portion of the flows here and then pump the rest away to reduce the flows? Even if we use just a portion to have a split system where we have, we call it normal potable water, black water, that's now your sludge, and then a gray water, you will still need to have some sort of treatment. You will still need some sort of a sludge. So the cost for that is immense. So you first want to treat the water and then use it in the community. But the issue is you need to be able to have your main offset point. So if, let's assume we are going to irrigate a golf course, but now, and this flow is dedicated for golf course. But if it rains too much, the golf course doesn't want that flow. So you need a different point to discharge that. So that's why it becomes complex to treat only a portion and pump it away. We need to make a holistic approach, and then we can take some of that flows away for domestic use or for a smaller portion of the use. Does that answer your question that you had about the split flows?
Yes, for now.
There's some more questions at the end that we can deal with. All right. So if we look to start up a project, the first thing that you need to know, if you don't have historic data, you start with looking at the population. So you need to go look, what was the population built in the last census, or you look what is the potential for properties that was built up, and you need to make some assumptions on that and decide how to get to a future capacity. And that's where the decision is, do we look at a 20-year horizon or a 50-year horizon? Where are we working towards? Because every time we get new information, every time there's a new census, we get more updated information. Every time, example, Union Bay gets a updated master plan. We know what is going on, then we can work on. So this is an ever evolving system to see what is your population and what is your future expansion. So if you look at what we have currently, the idea is on the wastewater side, I think, to have it upgrade up to 2040. So this thing has a 50 years and then also just up to 2040 for the 20-year projection. So with the information that we have, and once again, we looked at high, medium, and low growth scenarios, and we span that over the area. So we looked at for the Royston with historic information, the Royston, Gartley, Kilmarnock, Union Bay. I think that was all low growth situation, low growth scenario, 0.5% increase, and then there was a Union Bay growth that was based on the McElhaney Kensington Union Bay Estate Sewer Master Plan 2019. So once again, more updated figures, so we can adapt and we can add this information into the master plan, and that's why that was updated, and that gives us to a population like we see on the screen. So there's about in 2040 we're looking at about 6,500 people. So once again, Jim, on your question, we don't want to build something now for 14,000 people and have the taxpayers paid for now. We need to face this thing so everybody can get the most bang for their buck at this point. So that's how it's faced. But we will discuss that in the next discussion papers. All right, so this is just a look. It is in the handouts as well. So it's just a catchment area. So it will show you how it was just some of the areas divided up, how to collect all these areas, how to get it to a specific pump station. Because all these areas need to drain as much as possible to a lowest point and then pump to the larger pump stations and to get that all of them. So that is how it was grouped, depending on how your slope was, how the area, how the topography looked, what the survey information said, how we could possibly group that. So this was at a high level how it was filled up. All right, so on this next slide, if you look at flows, so it was touched on, touched up on it previously. So when you look at your flows, your typical flows that you have, your wastewater flow. So when we size a pump station or a force main, we look at a various combination of these flows. So your first thing that's important is average dry weather flow. So that is the flow that we expected every day to come in. So you can see over 24 hours, this is your flow with minimal infiltration. There's nothing much happening. This is your typical day. This is your flow that's coming in. So that is your average dry weather flow. Then you get a peak dry weather flow. So that is the peak sanitary flow during a typical dry weather day. So every day, twice a day especially, you expect a sort of a peak factor in the morning Depends on the size of a town. If it's a small population, you would expect it between 7 o'clock and 9 o'clock, you will get a peak flow because now everybody wake up, take a shower, and you get a spike in your flow. So all of a sudden you get this peak dry weather flow. Then this go on. Then in the day after everybody gets to work, go to shower around 8 o'clock, depending on which area, you will get another spike. So that is called the peak dry weather flow. Then other thing that you need to take into account is your inflow and infiltration. So what that sketch on the side just shows some factors for inflow and infiltration. So every time you have old infrastructure, you have a pipeline that's leaking. So if it's raining, you get this infiltration coming into your pipeline. So now you get a more diluted wastewater treatment works, waste flow that's coming in there. So that just adds to your pumping cost to get that. So every time there's a damaged pipe, or you get the roots into that, or there's a wrong connection somewhere, you get an inflow and infiltration factor. And we have the MMCD that guides us on how to size these factors and what do you need to allow for. So once again, these are the things that we look at, and then we get to a thing, to our final flow, that is our peak wet weather flow. So this is, you get this daily peak, and at that time you get the worst possible scenario with all the inflow, massive rain events, all of that ingress into your system, and now that whole system is pumped. But this thing is, once again, this is a split flow system. There it is. That blue line and the gray line show that we do not have a combined sewer and stormwater system. So the stormwater should never go into that line. It's just due to leaky infrastructure or something that went wrong they can do. But they should, but stormwater should always go into the stormwater pipe, and that will be discharged to the factors, to the outside. Ryan, you had a question?
Yeah, I wasn't aware that storm sewer and then all the catchment in the streets were part of the whole. No.
No, they're not part of the consideration in this planning process. Stormwater management isn't. I think Ian's just showing the slide just to show mainly kind of the sources of inflow and infiltration that can happen in this sanitary sewer system.
Thank you.
So the brief is very clear. We need to have, we do not want a combined system. We do not want all the drains from the streets, everything to go into the sewage, because now we need to convey this also. We want to keep it to the bare minimum wastewater flow. But you always get this infiltration during rain. Somebody has a flooding event at their home. Now they need to make a plan. So they just pump it up to the nearest manhole that they shouldn't, but it happens. So you need to just take that into account.
Sorry, Tabitha, did you have a question?
I think it was related, just that, is there any sort of formal storm system, but just ditching everywhere, as far as I've noticed, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So for the rural areas, it's stormwater is dealt with on individual properties and through the road ditching system.
You mentioned for your I&I numbers using MMCD. Do they have varying numbers for the age of the system? This is going to be a brand new system, so I would assume that your I&I rates are going to be quite low.
Then, yeah, but once again, when you don't have actual data, because it's such a, we don't know exactly what the flow is. We went with a conservative number. So we went on the conservative range of the inflow and infiltration. So it's based on, what was it, liters? I think we went on 0.06 liters per second per hectare. So it's just, so it is a conservative number, but from the MMCD, that is what they provide. So on the new system, I would have that close to 0. But to be conservative, we need to make sure for allowance if something went wrong. Yeah. Thank you for that. All right. So this is just the idea of what we were looking and how the population was split up. And that was all that we did, is we counted the amount of urban that we have, worked out on a population. We work on a liter per capita per day as provided by the MMCD, and that will go up. I think we worked on 240 liters a second, but it varies from area to area during the year. So it can easily go up to 260 and it can go down, but that is the conservative approach that we took to have 240 liters a second. The peak daily flow, the peaking factor, that was done by the typical Harmon factor. And then like we discussed, the inflow and infiltration. So that was just used. So you can see there's quite a difference if you look at an average dry weather flow for pump station 1 of 2.8, and then you go up to 17 liters a second. So we need to be able, you want your pump station to be able to handle that 17 liters a second. Although you get 90%, 95% of the time, you will get that 2.8 liters a second, you will get that in. But you need to be able to handle that 17 liters a second. So there is some plan. The more you can get, like Jim said, the more we can get that infill and infiltration factor lower, the more we can actually add people, we can add more lines into that and get more sewage into that if we do not have to have this infiltration factor. So the lower you can get that, the better it is. All right, so this just shows we already made projections for the type of flow and the amount of volume that we can expect for the flows. And we did that for 2025 up to 2017.
Excuse me, Ian. There's anecdotal evidence, discussion, whatever, going around about pipe sizing and flows. And that, and the reason I'm asking this is because of staging in different areas, and that if you were to handle a part of the flow, you would need to install a smaller pipe than if you handled all of the flow. And I just want to know, is that fact or myth? So for example, if we just did Union Bay and nothing else, would there be a technical requirement for a smaller pipe, or can you install a pipe big enough to handle all flows at the onset?
All right, perfect, Ian. That's a very good question. We have written extensive report on that to have this discussion, to see available options. But if you look at this sort of scenario that you described, if you pump sewage, raw sewage, it's unscreened. Now we pump this, you have limitations of your pumps. Where your potable water pumps can pump high heads, they don't have to have a solid passage. So that's the opening, like a tennis ball that your pump needs to pump. So that decreased the efficiency, increase the duty point of a pump. So now we can't pump that high heads, we need to lower them. Just because of equipment, what the equipment can do. So now we know we can only pump a certain amount of head with this long pipeline. The longer our pipeline, the more losses we have. So now we need to have massive pumps and then gravitate this down. And so that is the one issue, the one challenge that you have. Then your other challenge, when pumping raw unscreened sewage, you want to keep your flow velocity of at least 0.75 liters per second. Meters per second. Because if you go slower than that, your solids and your liquids starting to split. So now if you pump somebody, there's a bag that came into a plastic thing that comes into the pipeline, and you start pumping, everybody flush the toilet all at once. Now we get the pump running. So now we get all the solids starting settling out. This bag keep collecting everything, because now we don't have, they call it at 0.7, they call it self-scouring velocity or self-cleaning velocity. So now it basically forms a plug that you have here. So you need to make sure that your velocity in your pipeline is high enough, but if it's too high, you have too many losses in it. So that's a combination. So now, if we have this massive pipeline, we have a large pipeline that makes provision for all the towns up to 2070. If we have one pipeline for that, we will not be able to get that flow velocity. So you will have this short flows that you get out, and you will have pipe blockages a lot of the time. And one of your other issues, except for that, you're gonna have smells, because now you are moving this wastewater so slowly through the pipe, it started starting to get anaerobic. When as soon as you get that, you're talking about H2S gas, you're getting about that smells, you're getting all side of the nasty side of a wastewater treatment that you don't want to have. So it needs to be a balance. You need to understand what will be the immediate need, what will be the 10-year need, what is the ultimate, what we need to design for. So in our report, we looked at all of these scenarios. Do we look only at the ultimate growth and then scale it back, or what do we look at? So we got to a compromise with CVRD. We workshopped that a few times to look at what is the possible options. So there's a different scenario. So, and it's so flexible. If all of a sudden we say we need to get pump station 3, whatever the number was, they want to develop that area, they're ready, they procured fund, we need to start that. Then we need to be able to accommodate that and see how are we going to do that into the whole larger system. So it's not as easy as just say, get the capital funding for a large pipeline. We need to phase that in a sensible approach. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
It does, thank you. It doesn't answer the question of, seeing these options. So I guess if that's coming up later, is to say, how did the phasing get designed?
Yeah.
And how does that impact the cost of upgrading pipes or installing new pipes or twinning pipes, whatever that is along the way? That's really what I'm interested in is to say, what's the best decision now?
Okay. So we will, I assume with the next one, we will see that in the discussion paper, and we will submit that. You will see that option where we want to twin the pipe, where we want to add a new pump station in the future. So that is upcoming.
Yeah. Sorry. Looking at your previous slide about inflow and infiltration, it appears that when you're comparing 2025 and 2070, the inflow and infiltration rates seem to be mostly very similar. And of course, the big elephant in the room in all of this seems to me to be climate change. We only have to look what happened last winter in the Fraser Valley in terms of extreme weather events. Presumably, extreme weather events will make inflow and infiltration on the short term very, very different. And I'm sure I'm sure you have perennial discussions about extreme weather events, but it's not actually reflected it doesn't seem to me to be in this particular slide.
So on the inflow and infiltration, once again, because the ideal and what we are working towards and what this CVRD is pushing very hard is to have the separate system. So the intensity of the rainfall should not impact the amount of inflow infiltration, because that should we should have the clear dirty water separation. So we should have all the rain event, the massive stormwater event, they need to deal with that on the stormwater side. That shouldn't be. We just make the minimum provision for flows into our sewage network. So that a lot of that is dealt with on the stormwater side to channel that away. So we don't actually want that into our system. And that is, once again, for the inflow and infiltration, we're only looking at a burst, a pipe that has been cracked, and somebody that did a wrong connection, somebody that's illegal pumping into the sewage that shouldn't be doing that. So that should actually be policed better, or not policed, that should be policed, and that should be looked at on that side. So we shouldn't, in the sewage side, expect that much of a big event in terms of a flooding event. Our pump stations should be sized on a level that's higher than the stormwater expected flood conditions. It is, at this point, it's looked at submersible pumps, so it can keep the sewage can still be contained within it and pumping away even though the whole area is flooded. So it's trying to prevent that and to minimize that. But I know it's the climate change. That's one of the reasons, and we will get that into the next discussion paper, is one of the reasons why we had to move some of our pump station, because it falls under the expected flood lines of the in Royston. One of our pump stations they had to move because we were afraid of a possible flooding of the area on the coast. Right. Thanks for the question, Ken. All right. Ken, I was now waiting for your chemical side on these ones more. So I was preparing more for questions from you on this slide, but all right. So Miguel also touched on what are we looking at a wastewater treatment site. Okay, so now we've seen the amount of the population, we've seen the flow and what is being made provision for. Now, if we look at our wastewater treatment work, and once again, I'm first just going to give you an idea of some terminology that is used. If we look at currently how wastewater treatment work, some of the main factors are its size. So you have the flow component. So some of the equipment, some of the structures like your clarifiers, your physical processes, that is all sized on flow. The amount of flow that we get, the peaks, all of that is sized. Then our reactor, our heart, our secondary process, that is based on the organic load. So now to quantify that organic load, we look at these various things that we get prescribed from the federal government and from the municipal government. So we're looking at one of the terms that you will hear always when you look at a wastewater treatment work is BOD5. So this is the biochemical oxygen demand. So that it's basically the displacement of dissolved oxygen. So it's a test that they do to see how much oxygen is displaced. So that is one of the tests. Then the other one is the total suspended solids in the wastewater. So actual fine material that you have in the water. And then it's the total jail nitrogen, the TKN. So that is just to estimate the amount of organic nitrogen and ammonia that you have in your wastewater treatment works. All right, so that was quite a mouthful for you, but if you look at what we are basing our assumptions on for the contribution to the wastewater treatment work is on the CVS's liquid waste management plan. They looked at the last from 2013 to 2019. I think 2020 was also included. They looked at what is the average contribution of BOD. So we measure BOD, each person that connected to the sewage system, they added BOD to the system. So that is how it's measured. So we measure it in BOD and TSS, and we work it back to per capita. So what they did was they measured it for a year, every day, got the total inflow BOD, and then they divided in the population to get it up to grams per capita per day. So we just use that assumption to add it to the flow for the South region as well. So we said, well, we looked at 79 grams per capita per day on a maximum peak on 127. That's just a short peak that you look for. And then the average TSS at 94 grams per capita per day. And then on the max, what's the contribution? So with that, typically your BOD contribution as at this point is 79 grams, and that is what we work for, but it's quite a conservative number. Typically you would expect it around anything between 55 to 70, but now because we don't split the industries, so we don't say there's an industry that contribute more, we went the industry and commercial side. We went with this more conservative approach. So this one include a contribution from industries on that. So at this point, we don't know all of the contributing factors to the wastewater treatment on the south side, but we chose this factor on the same ratio that we have on the northern side, on the CVSS side. So we made provision for the commercial and for the industrial contributions to the wastewater treatment works. All right, so now if we look at the provisions made from that was made by the CVS liquid waste management plan and for the South extended sewer. So we all worked on the same assumptions. They at the point when this was done in the stage one, I think it was around about 2018, they didn't have all the information. So once again, as you get more information, you update your population growth rate. You update all of this information. So that was what we used. So you'll see this. We showed what they made provision for on the conveyance system for the CVSS liquid waste management plan. So at this point, they're looking up to 2040. So initially, they made provision for 5,798 people. And our projections with an updated projected flow is 6,498. So that's a difference of 691. So there's a difference. So the 600 people difference in 20 years' time is very, very small. So once again, it's assumptions that we use to get that. So if you look at the difference, it's about 11% difference in 2040 on just for the south flow. But if you look at the entire system, if you look at the 60,448 that they are expecting in 2040, it's a 1.2% difference. So it's not a major difference. So they were at that point very close to the allowance. All right. So that was just the difference. And then now, if we look at the wastewater treatment side. So if I talk about the wastewater treatment, I'm referring to the Comox Valley Water Pollution Control Center. So the wastewater treatment, this is just a summary slide. Michael touched on that. Again, once again, we have different limits. We have the federal limit that is 20, we call it the 2025 or 25 limit. So that is the amount of TSS and BOD that we contribute. And then we have the municipal wastewater regulations, and that's where it is 45 in the TSS. And then we have the old permit that was 60 for the TSS and 45 milligrams. So this, what I'm trying to show on this slide is, if you look at your wastewater treatment, that first column, it averages between 5 to 15 milligrams per liter for TSS and for BOD. So what this shows is you have an excellent plant at this point. It works very efficiently. It's very seldom that you get a plant that average so low and so consistently below the limits. So on quality, on the quality of the performance on your wastewater treatment work, it's doing everything that is required of it. It has a average percentage of TSS removal between 90 and 99%, and on BOD at 93%, which is much better than what is expected. The only issue that's happened during the course is due to the flows that we have had. The permit doesn't allow for that much of flow, and we increased that by 10%. But as you see on the first discussion paper, the operational certificate falls part of the phase 3 or the stage 3 option. So that is when they will need to update that operational certificate to get to the new flow, not for currently, but for the next 20, 40 years that will need to apply for the new operational certificate. All right, so Ken, I haven't forgot about your question. We will get back to that. I just want to run through a few more slides and then we can discuss phosphorus. All right, so what was suggested in the CVSS liquid waste management process? They looked at 4 options. So on stage 1, they looked at options. It varies of having only a bypass stream to get, actually you would produce a worse quality wastewater treatment work that will be closer to the 25, but it will still meet the government standards, but you will bypass. So that was a non-starter. Then we looked at option 2, which was the preferred option. There was option 2 included, we take all the flow, take it through preliminary treatment, primary treatment, secondary treatment, disinfect that, and then discharge that. So currently that disinfectant is not included. So that will be the main driver of the rest one. So there were additional items looked at, different options such as tertiary treatment, and then just a portion of tertiary treatment. But when they looked at all the factors, all the risk, all the information was on the table, this option was selected as the go forward option. Right, so it was the similar system that we have on site. It might need to be in the next few years, it needs to be upgraded to accommodate the larger flow, the more population, but the system, the process system will stay the same with the additional contribution of disinfectant. So they looked at various disinfectant as well, and they decided on UV at this point. And it makes sense. It makes very good sense for the area. UV effective disinfect for most viruses, bacteria, and spores. It is a physical process rather than a chemical one, and then it has no residual byproducts that can harm humans and aquatic life. So if you look at chlorine gas, so when you dose that, the virus, bacteria, everything absorb the chlorine. And now when you overdose that, because you need to dose it flow proportionally, you always have a little bit of residual chlorine left. And according to the regulations, you can't discharge too much of this chlorine, residual chlorine. So now you need to dose another chemical to get rid of the residual chlorine. So now you have to SMBS or the sodium metabisulfite just to get rid of that. So it's a nice clean process just to have the UV in, run that through the process, make sure we disinfect. So that decision was taken. Yeah, so that is where they are at that point. And that was on the table.
Ian, could I just interject that, because I wanted to know from Ken, does that respond to your question? And I just wanted to add, having witnessed the discussion at the previous TAC meetings regarding the level of treatment and the final decision to recommend the disinfection, that this was they really wrestled with this, and really it was a serious and I think thoroughly considered set of options, and you know, a strong recommendation from the TAC in the end that this was the way to proceed. And then I just wanted to ask Mark or Derry if you had anything you wanted to add to the final recommendations in the previous phase about the treatment plant options and where they landed.
Yeah, maybe Zoe, would you mind coming up and offering a little bit of a summary as well?
I hope you don't mind, Ian, but I just thought we should make sure that we deal with this head on.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I'm Zoe. I'm a project engineer at the CVRD, and I work extensively with Mark and Chris on the core area liquid waste management plan. So we did look at 4 options as kind of were summarized, and there was significant discussion and evaluation into those options. So currently, our plant is a conventional activated sludge plant that provides secondary treatment of all our wastewater flows. The other 2 options that were on the table were tertiary treatment, which is kind of the addition of a filter to add further treatment of all flows or of just the average dry weather flow. So bypassing the peak wet weather flows to size or filter a smaller size. As Ian alluded to, our plant operates really well as it is, and that kind of addition and the cost for that tertiary filter was not a small cost. And that was a large part of kind of our decision-making process, was the cost of the filter and tertiary treatment. Although it provides some additional benefits, the cost was also quite high. And looking at kind of where our plant performs now, the decision was to proceed with secondary treatment because we have really great effluent quality at this time. As part of the recommendation, we did provide for the provision for tertiary treatment in the future. So all of our kind of next round of upgrades and future master planning will keep in mind kind of a placeholder for space for tertiary treatment if it needs to come available. So we're not going to just kind of design it out. We'll have that provision there, but not implement it on day one. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Yeah, I had a question. So in terms of the pharmaceuticals and microplastics, are those measured in the quality of the outflow currently?
Not currently. So as part of the core area liquid waste management plan, we did look at that, and we have a technical memo that I'm happy to provide that kind of summarizes, how do you deal with those in wastewater, what we think's in our plant right now, although we don't sample directly, so we don't have a good handle exactly what's in our wastewater effluent right now for microplastics and pharmaceuticals.
So right now it's not part of the plan in overall for those types of items?
To sample for them?
To look at ways to minimize or eliminate those?
Not directly.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if you want to add any more treatment.
All right, so thank you for that. So if you look at, you had a specific question about, Ken, about the tertiary treatment. So tertiary treatment mean different thing for different people. So a lot of the time you were mentioning that for Alberta, for especially in the inland, they use where they don't have access to salt water, to large water body, they use filtration. So they use a disc filter type system at the end. So once again, that's only a physical process. So that will bring down your TSS nicely, but we don't have an issue with that. We dealt with that. So if you want to look at phosphate removal, you either need to have a biological phosphate removal plant, which is a very complex plant that is your recycle system is very complex, but it's doable, but you are not guaranteed that you will remove all the phosphorus. Now you need to have phosphate removal. You need to chemically precipitate that out. So now before your clarifier or your disc filter, you need to add lime, or you need to add alum or ferric. And once again, you sit with a sludge that's coming out of that. That's now phosphate rich with ions in it. And you have some of these ions of alum or lime, whatever you're going to use, that you will also just add to the system. So the reason why they typically use more phosphate removal for the inland is they are afraid of algae plumes in freshwater sources. So if you have sunlight, if you have nitrates, if you have phosphates, then you get algae plumes. So now we first of all try to minimize the nitrates and then the phosphates as a byproduct. But because we have a much larger body to dilute it with, it's not as big of a concern to have algae plumes than it is on a fresh body source. Does that answer your question about the phosphate?
Yes, I think so. And but to sort of to follow up and something that sort of gave me sort of grounds for hope is the fact that it seems clear that you have a current system that is expandable, that it's expandable as the technology changes. And the reason I say that is I know my experience was with Gold Bar treatment plant in Edmonton, and when they went for their licensing renewal, the government said the provincial government said you're well within specifications. However, we're going to give you 10 years warning that next time you come for licensing, we're going to ask you significant questions about pharmaceuticals and pharmaceutical degradation products. So, it's an evolving system. It's an evolving game. As the technology improves.
You're 100% right on that, Ken. And I looked at some of the previous questions. We workshopped that this week as well, that yes, tertiary treatment, we need to make provision for that because things might change in the future. There might be a massive drive and we get that. But what are they going to measure? So what Zoe said, what we are measuring is everything that's expected from us and more from the ministry. And that is measured, and we're meeting that perfectly. So if they would I don't think they would decrease their BODs. They might want to add nitrate. So we have provision for that. our site is large enough that we can add an external denitrification source, or if we need to have and phosphate removal, yes, we can dose ferric in front of that and take it away as part of the sludge, because we have an off-site sludge storage. So we have made provision, but it's difficult to say what do you want at the end of the day if you don't know if it might change. Because I know everybody would like to have the cleanest quality. We can do it up to potable water, but it's going to cost you that every time you flush the toilet, you will be nervous because you don't know how much it's going to cost you, because it increases tenfold. So there need to be a balance. And this is just where we are. And this is what the CVRD is, or the plant itself, it's really way within its limits. It has space available to expand. So it has really, from this, me personally, I don't have any concerns about the plant because it just has the capacity to upgrade and to have the space available.
Thanks for that, Ian. We have a question from Lindsay on Zoom. Lindsay?
Thank you. And Ian, you answered my first question, which was, is there room to expand and plan for, say, like clarifier expansion with the increased flow? That's great. But I just wanted to clarify something I probably misheard. You're speaking about bypassing the plant, hinting at enhanced primary treatment. I'm not sure if I heard that right. I'm just curious if the plant has the hydraulic capacity to handle the increased flow, but the current operating permit, it already exceeds the limits of discharge. I'm just curious about that
So there's
aspect of increased inflow.
Yeah, thank you for
Thanks.
that. There's two things. So the bypass that we were talking about, that was some of the options that was looked at, where you would bypass a portion of the flow just around the secondary treatment, and then disinfect that to get closer to the 25 BOD and TSS that was measured. And that was taken off the cards. The other option that Zoe said was to have the peak flows, just bypass some of the process type, but that was all the way forward was discussed, to have everything going through the whole system, pre-screening, pre-treatment, primary, secondary, and then disinfect. So that's the whole process. Then on your question about the amount of flow, so there's a certain, the license regulation give you a certain amount of flow that it was licensed for. And if we exceed that by more than 10% on a constant basis, then we will need to apply for an upgraded one. So irrespective if this process will go forward, they will go on with this operation permit, operation certificate, to make sure they will stay within that. And with the federal and municipal regulations, it won't affect the plant's capacity. They will not expect, as we're already on the most stringent capacity that is provided by the government. So we are not concerned that there might be a different parameter that we need to treat to. Does that answer your question?
It sure does. Thanks very much.
Perfect. Thank you, Lindsay. All right, sorry. This is my last slide. So the treatment work will require upgrades due to increased flow and load from the overall growth. That would hopefully, if we get approval from this TAC meeting, from the liquid waste management, and that will include for the area A as well. So they are busy with a master plan study where they're looking specifically at the facility where they make provision for these additional flows and loads that we provide for them. So that is taken into account. So as part of the master planning, they are looking at that for the future expansion. So just know that it is in process, and it is close to be finalized, that facility master plan. So they take note of the new flow. So
I don't know. Zoe, do you have any more details to add on the facility master plan for everyone? Maybe some timelines or?
Thanks, Terry. So yeah, the facility master plan is underway. It's a two-phase process. So the first phase of the plan is looking at options for secondary treatment. As I mentioned earlier, our plant is a conventional activated sludge treatment plant facility. There's more than one way to achieve secondary treatment in different technologies. So as a start, we looked at, does conventional activated sludge make sense? Does it fit on the site? Because we're looking at a 50-year timing window. Check those boxes. Operationally, there's a lot of benefits to sticking with what we already know. So the new upgrades at the plant will continue with a conventional activated sludge treatment. Now that we've made that decision, we'll be proceeding with the phase 2 of the work. And that looks at kind of siting on the plant and on the facility. And where do we put the new clarifiers? Where do we put the new bioreactors? Kind of the staging. So when do we need those? And what's kind of the threshold for flows and loads for our next bioreactor, our next primary clarifier? The intent of the plan is to kind of give us a 50-year planning horizon that looks at flows, loads, and when we need what and where it goes. That's the point. Also looking at kind of optimizing and maximizing the use of our existing infrastructure. So we already have 3 trains. We'll be looking to mirror that. What can we use and how long can we use it? What's the condition? It's all kind of part of that. The other big piece of that study work is separate from the liquid stream is the solids management strategy. So how do we dewater our biosolids and what does that look like and where does that fit on the site? So it's kind of just putting all the pieces together and getting a really solid plan for the upgrades at that plant over the next 50 years is in the intent, hoping to wrap that up by the end of the year. So the phase 2 work, the phase 1 study was presented at the Sewage Commission yesterday. If you're interested, you can find it on the minutes.
So any questions about the treatment plant itself? As you've come to understand, that's not going to be part of this process, but it is important that you sort of understand the direction that it's taking and are confident in having that sort of off on the side.
Yeah, I know the existing plant is somewhat configured to do BNR at the present time. And, given the fairly high quality of effluent that you're producing, has there been any thought about actually trying to do some BNR at the plant? Most of the aeration basins are configured with their anoxic zones and mixers and everything else. So it might be a good time just to play with it a little bit and try to get a feel of what BNR would look like.
Yeah, we talked about it. Actually, it was one of the options that we kind of dug into in the
Can
phase
somebody
1.
explain what DNR is?
Thanks, Ian. I'd appreciate that too.
All right, so it is a biological nutrient removal plant. So it depends on, you get different types. If you look, so we forget about if you look at a wastewater treatment work, we have preliminary pre-screening. So that will be your screens, your physical process. So that will be, Then you get your primary work where you have some sludge where you removal on PST, where you just separate it. Then we're looking at our secondary treatment. So this is what Jim is referring to. So if you look at your secondary, there are different processes that you can follow. So you look at either just a aeration basin. I think that's what we have now, just the aeration basin, and where we break down the COD, where we break that down, and then we go to the filtration portion, which is just a clarifier that we physically separate. So what he's referring to is to have a biological nutrient removal where we have an anoxic system before that. So you get different configurations, but the most basic is the modified Lutzang Edinger, MLE, where you have recycled streams as well. So you get rid of your nitrates and your ammonia into this process. And for your question, to have it even more complex, you can have an anaerobic basin as well, where you can get biological phosphate removal as well. But that gets so complex in your system. So now, if you have that, you will offer up some of your aeration basins. So at this point, as we are looking at only our BODs, if we need to have BNR, we might not, because we measured on BODs and not on nitrates at this point. So we might have to pay in some of our that to have more nitrate removal. But it's a combination, and I don't know if they play with it. There's various configurations, but that is does that answer your question about what it is and how the system is? So, and then the DNER is just extended.
My question is answered, so sorry, Zoe.
Oh, that's okay. That was a far better explanation than I could have given. Thank you. We haven't looked at kind of playing around with our aeration basins at this point. It's kind of just cruising. We're happy.
Any other questions? Any questions from Zoom? Yeah, Lindsay?
Again, sorry, it's very interesting to me.
Oh,
Is it, you said that there is already an anoxic zone. Is it piped for return flow? Is that infrastructure exist already, or would it have to be modified?
I'm not sure exactly. I'd have to touch in with our manager of wastewater. I don't know the exact configuration off the top of my head. Sorry.
No worries. Thanks.
You might know.
It used to be.
Yeah. At one point it was. I'm not sure if it still is.
anything else? Great. Thanks, Ian.
I do want to add something. I know perhaps the Ministry of Environment, might have further regulations, right? Further strict protocols or framework being worked on. Is the plant ready for that? Ready for some sort of reconfiguration or maybe a modification? That seems like that's the way we're going, is things are getting a little bit more strict. And
so that's a very good question, and that is something to look at. But at this point, we are not aware of any specific items, so it's difficult. It's how long is a piece of string? What do we need to design this for exactly? So there is provision made, and with the space that we have available, if we need to do the BNR, we can have a pump system to get our recycle streams in. It is option, so that is why we have space available. So we said they did make provision for the tertiary treatment. If we need to bring down our TSX, we have the option to add chemical phosphate removal that we might expect. If there's something, it might be more towards the phosphate. If it's a nitrate, we can look at extended aeration. So there is provision, and it can all, if your biggest challenge is if you are tied into a very small footprint and you can't do anything else, then it becomes challenging if there might be a change in, but then there's typically an agreement and say, well, we cap this size and the municipality is responsible to get a new site where this might happen. But yeah, we should have enough provision. We should have enough space to get these in order. And it doesn't make, like I said, it's difficult now. And that was, I was not involved in the conversation, but as I read through the minutes and all the letters, it was I don't want to say heated debate, but it wasn't a debate where people looked at all of these options. But at this point, we are complying to all of the standards that's expected. We made provision for further things just for the space allowance. So I think the CVRD really tried to make provision for all of these possible scenarios. We expect.
Anything else? Okay, thanks so much. We're just going to talk a bit about your process and what we're going to do, or maybe I should say our process, what we're going to be responsible for really over the next year. I assume that everybody's had a look at the terms of reference. And so, part of our commitment is to work within those terms of reference and fulfill the roles and responsibilities as laid out. The TAC and PAC is going to operate as a joint committee unless there's a specific need to do otherwise. So we'll come together as one. And the decisions as outlined in the terms of reference are generally to be made by consensus. And in the last phase, it was quite a remarkable process to be a part of, I have to say. And by and large, almost all, but I think maybe 2 decisions were in fact made by consensus. And when the group couldn't come to absolute consensus, what was asked of the dissenting opinion was that they prepare a draft of explaining their position that then went forward to the Sewage Commission. And it's my understanding of reading the terms of reference that that's what will be asked of this committee too, so that both positions are presented to the decision makers, the ultimate decision makers. So we're aiming for consensus, we're aiming for agreement, and all of the debate and the discussion that will hopefully point us in that direction. Any questions or comments about the process or the terms of reference as they've been laid out? I'm assuming you're all volunteered for the job, so you feel fairly comfortable with them. Part of the process will be to balance needs and wants and some of the constraints. And Derry, I don't know if you want to speak to this or do you want me to discuss it? Okay, all right. You know, under the needs category, we've got, you know, all the regulatory requirements, environmental protection, engineering standards, and other sort of technical requirements that the options need to fit into. And, you know, in large part, that'll be the purview of the TAC, but you know, we have some incredible, I can tell just from the discussion already that we have some really great minds around the table. So I'm sure everybody will want to have some part in that and to voice some points of view about that. That would create, you know, sort of the minimum project requirements. And then of course there are the community wants. So largely the purview of the PAC and the community public representatives. So these would include community aspirations, capacity, aesthetic considerations, non-regulated quality considerations, and then other benefits to the communities. Then ultimately you would have your ideal project, and then you have to confront some of the constraints. And it was interesting to hear that cost and, you know, finance capacity is going to be a major consideration in this project. And I understand from the previous referendum that was you know, a big consideration. So just given the geography and the existing system, you know, understand how that is just such an important part of this project too. So, you know, funding limitations, timing, operational complexity, geography, geology, and other constraints that will constrain your ability to have to choose the ideal project ultimately ending up with the selected project and the recommendation that you'll make to the Electoral Services Committee and the Sewerage Commission. Probably not rocket science. Any questions about that? I'll just say again, in the first phase, it was really interesting to watch this process play out and how there were compromises made in the end, particularly around costs and different components of the ultimate recommendation. Just a few other things about the committee process. The decision-making areas of focus, conveyance, this is a huge part of it, the force main, and then the pump stations. Sorry, maybe I'll just go back. The force main, the social concerns and mitigation measures, and the pump stations, social and environmental considerations. And then the third piece is the collection system, so the type configuration phasing. and then ultimately support for the overall project concept and phasing. So those are going to be the foci of this effort and the two committees work going forward over the next year. Any questions about that? So just to be clear, the treatment it's not a part of this. It was part of the first phase of this project, and it's on its way going forward. Much more focused and localized considerations in this go around. Yeah, Derek?
Yeah. No, I guess before we kind of jump into what to expect for the next meeting, we were hoping at this meeting for each of kind of the separate committees, the technical and public advisory committees, to adopt the terms of reference that have been put in front of you. So I guess I would just ask, maybe taking it one at a time. So if members of the technical advisory committee have any concerns, edits, additions that they would like made to the terms of reference.
I'm assuming you want a motion and a seconder and a
Yeah,
vote of
please.
the technical, and that would include the people on Zoom.
That's right. Yep.
A big chunk of the membership is on Zoom. Yeah, does anybody want to see, we do have physical copies of the terms of reference. If you don't have one in front of you, we could give you one. Brian would like one.
Is it possible? Hi, this is Lindsay on Zoom. Is it possible to blast out an email with that terms of reference? I either didn't receive it or have misplaced it. Sorry. Sincere apologies.
It's in the agenda. Lindsay, do you have access to that? We could put a link in the chat, maybe?
Kind of near the end of the agenda package.
I just didn't scroll far enough. Sorry. Excuse my ignorance.
It's actually the last.
It's going to fade into the background now.
And the technical advisory is the first one. I also wanted to point out, and I'm sorry I neglected to do this, there is on the first page the role of the committee and the TAC. And then there is a code of conduct on page 3 of the terms of reference that I just wanted to highlight. And all of the code of conduct aims at, well, let me just go through these because I think it's important that we support an open and inclusive process, disclose any potential conflicts of interest, treat others with courtesy and respect, listen attentively with an aim to understand, speak in terms of interests versus positions. Where a member is espousing a favored position or course of action, they must fully and honestly disclose the reasons for their positions, be open to outcomes, not attached to outcomes, focus on service provision, and share and discuss ideas from a professional perspective. So this is for the TAC. And there is a similar code of conduct for the PAC. You're also asked to speak from a professional perspective. Maybe that's a little less true. Presumably you're representing your community interests. So if members are comfortable, members of the TAC are comfortable, if we could ask somebody to make a motion to adopt the terms of reference and seconder, and then maybe we could take a vote. That's what you're after, Derry, right?
This is for the TAC or the PAC?
For the TAC.
Okay.
TAC, and we'll do a similar motion for the PAC. Oh, sorry, Lindsay, have you got your hand up?
No, I'll just put it right down. I can. Who knew I could be so problematic from a distance?
Well, on behalf of the Technical Advisory Teams Committee, I'll move that we adopt the Technical Advisory Committee, what are they, the committee terms of reference.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder from the Technical Advisory Committee?
Yeah, I second that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ella. And then if I can call the question and ask for those in the room who are members of the Technical Advisory Committee to put their hands up. And if I could ask for those on Zoom to put their hands up. Again, just the Technical Advisory Committee. So I'll call the question. All in favor? Just two of you? Good for you. Okay. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just for Michael's help, do you want me to, I can call for those opposed. Is there anyone, if I could ask, thank you so much. If I could ask if there are any members of the Technical Advisory Committee that are opposed to adopting these as your terms of reference. I see none. So we're good to go. Michael, poor Michael's trying to record this. Thanks so much, all of you. And then for the Public Advisory Committee, could I have, if you so desire, a motion to adopt these terms of reference as your terms of reference for the work going forward?
Move to adopt.
Sorry, Ken and Ian.
Second.
Any discussion? So can I have the PAC members? Well, again, maybe if it's okay with you procedurally, can I call for the those opposed? Thank you. Can I just call for those that are opposed to put up their hands? I see none. That's a good start, Michael. We have consensus. Thanks, Michael. Much easier.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
I just had one question on it. I noticed, looking at the list of names that it's not up to date in terms of the people on it. So just request that it could be on the next meeting. Because Nico's not on it for sure, and neither am I, so. You're not on the list.
Nico Prince. Yep, he's on the list that I have. Oh, in the terms of reference. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point.
Certainly we'll
Sorry.
make those updates.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So then, looking forward to our next meeting, which is scheduled for November 23rd, the same time, I believe, 12:30.
If I could interrupt, one of the
Yes,
things it
please.
says in the terms of reference is electing of a chair. Is that something that is done now? Has it been done? Is it?
Yes, it does refer to that.
Yeah, it does. And so I guess as a combined committee, maybe there could be some discussion or decision as to whether or not you would choose to represent or to elect a single chair or 2 chairs. And I believe it speaks to kind of the one of the main roles of the chair is being kind of the representative for the committee, you know, to attend potentially steering committee meetings or otherwise and represent the decisions of the committee. So any thoughts on a single chair for a combined PAC TAC, or whether or not 2 representatives might be preferred?
The terms of reference specify 1 for each, and they would attend each other's committees, right?
Yeah.
But seeing how we have one
Yeah.
joint committee, that seems redundant.
We could elect one, and thank you, Ian, for bringing our attention to that. We could elect one, and then should there be a need to have separate meetings, we could elect a second chair. Or whichever committee is not represented. So do we have any volunteers who would like to take on that role?
Yeah, I volunteer for that role.
Is that Andrew?
Yeah, my pitch is that I could be on either committee because I'm an engineer and also a representative of the chamber. So that's my pitch. If no one else is interested.
Is there anyone else that would be interested? Should we have a mover and a seconder? Should we do this by resolution?
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Andrew. So maybe could I ask, sorry, Andrew, can you just introduce yourself again? Just, sorry, you were just a bit garbled when you just say who you represent and.
Yeah, sure. So Andrew Gower, I represent the Comox Valley Chamber of Commerce. Some background of that, I'm a past chair. I served on the board of the chamber for about 6 years. And I still volunteer with the board as they call me the advocacy chair. So I help them develop advocacy positions. And in my day job, I'm a civil engineer. I'm one of the partners and the local principal for Weather Engineering, civil engineering.
Sorry, a bit hard to hear you, but yeah, so he's the president of the Chamber of Commerce and was
past chair. I'm the
past chair.
I'm no longer an active member of the board. I'm kind of like a volunteer director on the board. I help with advocacy, so advocacy positions for the board. And I'm a civil engineer with Weather Engineering here in Courtney.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone be interested in nominating Andrew as the chair of the combined TAC PAC?
Seeing how I started this, I will nominate Andrew as the chair of the joint TAC PAC.
Thanks, Ian. Is there a seconder? Ryan?
I just want to know what's the purpose really when we're all here? Well, why do we need to nominate one person to represent us?
Again, I think as well, I'll let you speak again.
Yes, so I think, you know, we're all here and we're going to be working together through the coming months, hopefully to come to a consensus decision on a preferred option. But there may be points within that process where we want to kind of, I guess, summarize our discussion or present our preferred option to the steering committee or kind of other bodies. And that's where a chair is good to have so that they can be there to kind of represent the committee and talk about the conversations we've had and the decisions that have been made.
Perfect, thank you.
Is there a seconder? Thanks, Ryan.
I second.
Any discussion?
If I could ask, Andrew, is it your intention to just attend by Zoom or would you be able to attend in person? I find it difficult on Zoom sometimes to hear what you're saying, and also I think seeing your face, if that's possible, would be good.
Yeah, just I'm gonna check one thing here.
We can see you now, Andrew.
Okay.
So sorry, just.
Is that better sound?
That is better sound.
Okay, yeah, I do intend to attend in person. I just was a little under the weather this week, so elected to stay home just out of an abundance of caution.
Thanks, Andrew. Double thanks for that. Then could I ask any other questions, any other discussion? Great. If I could just ask if anyone would be opposed to Andrew being elected as chair to represent the opinion of both committees? Seeing none. Congratulations, Andrew. That concludes our business. Is there any other, and I really open this up and offer you this opportunity to ask any questions you have at this time. Oh, no, I'm sorry, we're going to talk about the next meeting, but still, I mean, this too is ask any questions about either the process or the substance, or to offer any suggestions going forward. But the next meeting, scheduled for November 23rd, we'll be looking at the sewer extension south project design costs and phasing, collection system options and cost comparisons, pump stations design and siting options, and draft stage 1 environmental impact study. Anything you want to add to that, Gary? No.
I've got a question.
Yes. please, Ron.
There's been rumblings in Union Bay about discharge or treated water going into Washer Creek. Does this sewer extension south project have anything to do with that, or is that a separate issue with the developer of Union Bay Estates?
Yeah, no, this project is specifically looking at kind of a regional option of conveying all wastewater to the Comox Valley Water Pollution Control Center.
Gotcha, thank you.
So there's no proposal for this project to do that. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Jim?
So under a liquid waste management plan, Barry, does the authority then shift to the regional district in terms of what is allowed for discharges within its area of its liquid waste management plan? For example, Union Bay Estates, I know I don't want to put Melanie on the spot over there, but I know that they're trying to proceed with an application. But if a liquid waste management plan was in effect, would the regional district be able to, in essence, veto that?
Is the question, Jim, whether kind of this committee or kind of through the liquid waste management planning process, whether water quality objectives can be kind of set for water bodies within the plan area? I might pass on over to Melanie to answer.
So any applications under the municipal wastewater regulations, any new sewage discharges go under the municipal sewage regulation, they can't conflict with an approved liquid waste management plan. But there'd have to be something in the plan that would say that something couldn't happen for it to conflict with it, right? And my understanding of this process and the scope of this process doesn't include any other considerations of discharges in the area. So there are two separate processes. So right now, the decision on that application of the municipal wastewater regulation is unaffected by this process.
Thank you for that.
Any other questions or comments at this point? Anything else we need
Perhaps
to do?
just a question
Yeah.
about distribution of materials, and it could be that I remain ineffective at managing my emails. But I didn't get documents, or I didn't find documents in my emails. And I'm just wondering if there's a place we should be going to look if they are being emailed to us. I checked the project page and I didn't find them there either. So is it just maybe the list needs to be updated for me to be added to it, or I don't know if other people experience the same thing.
Yeah, apologies for that, Ian. I'm not sure if anybody else experienced the same thing. Generally, we're not going to be attaching agenda packages to emails. We'll be providing a link, which is what we did this last time. So it's just due to the kind of size of all of the documents that we'll be sending out.
And maybe I just looked in the wrong place, that it's on a meeting
Yeah.
schedule or something.
I think, and you probably aim to send out information a week in advance of, say, November 23rd, and you'll send a link, and then you go to the website and download I think you can view and download, right? And we will have some hard copies here as well, generally.
That's right.
Yeah. So I think in a week in advance of November 23rd, you can expect that the information will be available, and you can expect to get an email. And you can also go to the project website, and the information, the agenda was posted there, because that's where I got it. Yeah. Sorry?
Oh, there was a chat on.
It's the old one. Yeah, it's the old one. Oh, sorry. It's Shelley asking, could we get a copy of today's presentation material? It'll be uploaded to the project website.
But I can certainly send out a link to the group as well.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Shelley. Ian, is there something else? No? I guess you might also check your junk email, right? Sorry. Your junk email box.
So, I mean, we have left quite a bit of time for discussion today, and I know we've covered a lot of material. And so please, if there's any questions about kind of the process, how this addendum process kind of fits into the larger planning process, any questions about our past 2014, 2015 LWMP process. Mikhal's here today. She won't be here next meeting. So please, yeah.
Yeah, Roseanne?
Yeah, looking at the bigger picture, like, you know, digging into the ground, is there any kind of overarching timeline for when we might think to even expect, you know, sewer hookup in the south? Like even just an estimated year, for example, not like, you know, not like a date or even a range of years.
I would say that's, you know, largely dependent on obviously the outcome of this process, which will really kind of identify the path forward for this project. And then, you know, following this addendum process, there will be a stage 3 liquid waste management plan, a combined plan that will need to be developed. And yeah, then all of the other processes involved in a large project, procurement and otherwise. So it's a few years away.
The grant outcome.
Grant outcome, that's right, yeah.
Maybe a
Lots of
follow-up
moving
is how long do stage 3 plans often take? Like this one's, I guess, about a year from where we are today.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Melanie, if you have kind of an approximate, but I would say likely around a year or less. Yeah.
I think the ministry aims for 6 months to a year to review a plan once it's been received at the stage 3 level. So, and that's like the review at comes into staff level and then has to make it up to the minister's desk, and the minister is the ultimate decision maker. So yeah, it can take between 6 months and a year. And that's after the plan's went through all your process. Yeah.
So I guess maybe that's, not sure if that was mentioned in the earlier presentations, but once the stage 3 plan is developed, it's submitted to the ministry and it needs ministerial approval in order to be kind of active and endorsed and able to kind of be implemented.
Perhaps this is a question for November 23rd, but I know there are some community members that are wondering if we can opt out of the system. Right? Maybe it gets to the bottom of the street and the street doesn't want to hook up because they have brand new systems, you know, stage 2 systems that can, you know, do the job.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a question we've heard before through the previous process. And I think, you know, essentially this is an expensive project with a small number of participants. So the more people that opt out, the more expensive it becomes for everybody else. So largely, I would say there's likely not going to be an option to opt out. However, we are looking at different kind of options for those people that do have new systems in terms of when they may join the system and how that may look.
Thanks, Derek.
Tabitha?
I'm just wondering if you have, if maybe on the website or something, there was a better version of the map that showed exactly what areas are included, because yeah, some of the areas are like, oh, is that? I was like looking, oh, is the elementary school included? I just couldn't quite tell, right?
So I think next meeting we'll be getting into kind of those more detailed maps and streets and pipes and all those important things.
And are those lines, are they inked in or are they movable at this point?
Certainly, you know, obviously the details of the project are up for kind of discussion and input from this community. So nothing's set in stone.
These are all really good questions because I'm sure they're filling in some gaps in your minds. So anything else, right?
Yeah, just to summarize, so for our community members, the reason for going ahead with this project is one, future development, right? To be able to help with that, and failing systems. Is that correct? Is there another one in there that we can just bullet point and tell people why we're doing this?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the primary driver for the project is environmental concerns and failing systems in the area. Certainly, we may see growth in the area. It is a designated growth area in our regional growth strategy, but a lot of that does depend on servicing. Another important consideration, I think, is Comox First Nations and their interest in the project, our interest in reconciliation, and certainly their servicing for their development lands in the south.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Anything that the staff want to say? Anything else for the consultants? Thanks, Mark.
I just want to build off of Derry's answer there, which was really good, just the last comments that she made, but this, like the order of your two things, Ryan, for sure, I would reverse the order and say this is, this project and process is primarily about water quality and improving water quality in Bain Sound. And early in this meeting, we showed a graphic of the history. It goes back to, I don't know, the 70s or something like that, when this discussion first started about, failing septic systems and the ability of discharging wastewater to land on these small lots and in this area. So, that's really the primary purpose. Back then development wasn't even on the table really. So yeah, primarily it's water quality objectives and in improving that. And then secondarily, it is also about development that, there's an opportunity right now to work with a couple of key partners. And like Gary said, with the Comox First Nation, who have aspirations for development in the area and a lot of land in the area. But that development really brings a strong opportunity to this project and this initiative. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of reinforce Gary's response there. Thanks.
Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And I think everybody here is dedicated to the protection of Bain Sound. I think that's probably why we're all here. But there's no doubt that this is development driven in a lot of ways. When we look at the population projections that are in the reports and everything else, it's allowing that development to take place. So I think we need to keep that in mind, that development does need to play a big part in this. And there's no denying that without that aspect of it, this project is going to be extremely expensive for the existing number of people that this system is going to serve.
Caitlin?
I just had a quick question about the 2015-2016 process. And I know that when you talked about environmental concerns, you mainly mentioned shellfish, and shellfish are a great indicator species, but I was wondering if there were any sort of other environmental concerns that were integrated that in otherwise, other than water quality impacts on shellfish.
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Shellfish were considered a risk factor, but not actually an environmental concern. We looked at indirect ways of where, knowing that shellfish was a concern, we looked at indirect environmental parameters, such as what's the environmental loading into the receiving environment from the wastewater that was projected to be produced. We also looked at greenhouse gas emissions and the carbon footprint of the treatment plant. There might have been one other one, but it was definitely a holistic approach. Shellfish was 100% something that the committee, it was important to the committee. And in addition to that, some of the other risk factors that were looked at related to viruses, emerging contaminants, pharmaceuticals. So there was that aspect as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
I got a question.
Yeah, right.
Last one.
No, go ahead.
Mark, you talked about working partners with Comox and Union Bay Estates. Do we know their contributions you know, and how that's going to impact us moving forward as homeowners and landowners and business owners. Or is that something still on the table and in discussion? Because that will impact, you know, how it trickles down to us financially.
So we have scenarios worked out that include partnership contributions towards the project, plus the grant, plus resident, responsible contributions. So like Gary said, those are going to be discussed at a future meeting. I'm not sure if it's the next one or future one, but yeah, we'll get into those details. You'll have a lot more insight into what that looks like.
Fantastic. Good to know. Thanks.
All good questions. Anything else? Anything from the Zoom people? Any questions about our next meeting? Hearing none. I again just really want to thank the TAC members for coming forward and representing their organizations. And I'd like to especially thank the Public Advisory Committee members for your service to your communities and going through, making this commitment and spending this time and all the mental energy that it's going to require. And you're doing really terrific service for your community. So thanks very much. Jerry, any closing comments?
Yeah, no, just echoing that. And yeah, thank you everyone very much. I know it's going to be, a lot of materials, a lot of information thrown at you, and obviously a lot of time, and your consideration and input is very valued and we appreciate.
And I look forward to seeing you on November 23rd. Thank you all.